What is 15 years of your life worth? Most people measure it in milestones, like mortgages or promotions. I measured mine in inventory shipments, coastal storm preparation, and the scent of roasted espresso cutting through the morning brine. But if you ask my parents, a decade and a half of my loyalty had a precise and undeniable cash value. Exactly $1. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled my own family's legacy, welcome to Intimately Told Stories. If you have ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, hit subscribe and let me know your age in the comments below so we can share our experiences. It was a Friday morning in late May. The Newport waterfront was already humming with the frantic energy that precedes the summer tourist influx. Inside Jung Coastal Provisions, the air held its usual comfort. A blend of cedar floorboards, fresh Atlantic scallops on ice, and the dark roast coffee I brewed at dawn. I stood behind the scarred oak counter, ticking off a delivery manifest with a heavy black pen. Captain Elias, a retired harbor pilot who came in every morning for his coffee, leaned against the register. He grumbled, waving his paper cup toward the front window. Another season, another nightmare trying to park. The city council promises solutions, but half the pier is blocked by out-of-state license plates. A man cannot even buy bait without walking 6 blocks. It is the bottleneck, I replied, signing the bottom of my clipboard. Every year they build more hotels, but no infrastructure to hold the cars. We need a designated lot right on the water, or the local trade is going to choke. I did not know it then, but that offhand complaint about asphalt and cars would become the exact blueprint for my revenge. The brass bell above the door chimed. The ocean breeze swept in, bringing my parents, Albert, and Vivian along with my younger brother, Derek. The visual dissonance was immediate. My store was a working hub of canvas aprons, heavy boots, and salt-stained denim. Derek walked in, wearing a tailored charcoal suit. He looked like he was heading to a Wall Street merger, not a maritime supply market. Albert and Vivian trailed behind him. Their expressions were tight, practiced, and devoid of their usual parental warmth. They did not glance at the overflowing display of artisanal preserves or the line of waiting customers. They marched straight to the register. Captain Elias sensed the shift in the atmosphere. He tipped his hat and quietly stepped away toward the aisles. "Mom, Dad," I said, setting the clipboard down. I shifted my gaze to my brother. "Derek, you're up early." Albert did not offer a greeting. He reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a manila folder, and slid it across the scratched wood of the counter. The paper stopped right over a gouge I had sanded down myself 3 winters ago. "Read it," Albert instructed. His tone was flat, devoid of negotiation. I opened the folder. It was a severance agreement wrapped in a transfer of management rights. For a decade and a half, I had operated on sweat equity. The LLC was always promised to me. It was a carrot dangled to ensure I worked 80-hour weeks, skipped holidays, and poured my youth into keeping the family business afloat, while Derek drifted his way through an expensive MBA program. The legal transfer was supposed to happen this year. Instead, the document stated that ownership was being formally gifted to Derek. "He is going to modernize the legacy," Charlene Vivian chimed in. Her voice was coated in that thin, sugary veneer she used when she wanted to avoid a scene. "His degree means he understands corporate scaling. You have done a nice job keeping the lights on, but the store needs a visionary." I scanned the legal jargon. It was not just a transfer. Buried in the 3rd paragraph was a waiver clause. By signing, I agreed to forfeit any right to sue for back pay, overtime, or unpaid dividends over the last 15 years. The compensation offered for signing away my life work was spelled out in bold print. $1. They did not see a daughter who built an empire from a failing bait shop. They saw a placeholder, an employee they no longer wanted to pay. Derek stood there, shifting his weight, trying to project a boardroom stoicism, but his eyes darted nervously to the intricate point-of-sale system he had zero clue how to operate. I looked at Albert. I looked at Vivian. I did not scream, I did not cry. The betrayal was so sharp, so surgical, that it bypassed grief and struck a cold, dormant nerve deep in my chest. I reached into the pocket of my canvas apron and pulled out my wallet. I extracted a crisp green $1 bill. I laid it flat on the counter, directly over the signature line of their insulting contract. "Keep your dollar," I said. My voice dropped the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. "Consider my equity bought." I reached up, unclasped the brass name tag I had worn since I was 23, and placed it neatly on top of Washington's face. Without another word, I untied my apron, let it fall over the register, and walked past them. I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the biting Rhode Island wind, leaving them stranded in a packed store staring at a cash register they did not know how to open. The fog rolling off the Narragansett Bay paints the morning sky in bruised shades of purple and gray. I sit at my kitchen island, a mug of black tea warming my palms. The silence of my apartment feels heavier than usual. For 15 years, my Saturday mornings began at 4 o'clock, fielding texts from fishermen and double-checking inventory sheets. Today, my phone screen remains dark. I press the side button. The display illuminates, showing a cascade of notifications. 52 automated emails sit stacked in my inbox. Your password has been changed. Your administrative access has been revoked. Your user profile has been deleted. My brother did not just take the physical keys to the building. He orchestrated a digital execution. He systematically erased a decade and a half of my labor before the sun even cleared the horizon. I remember sitting at a folding card table in the back office 12 years ago, shivering in a drafty room, manually migrating our entire inventory system from Albert dusty paper ledgers into a modern cloud database. I built the vendor portals from scratch. I cultivated the social media presence pixel by pixel. I established the secure banking protocols that kept the business afloat during the lean winter months. Now a sterile, automated prompt tells me my credentials no longer exist in a system I designed. I dress in my usual weekend attire: faded denim jeans, a heavy wool sweater knitted by a local vendor, and scuffed leather boots built to withstand salt and slush. The drive down Thames Street is quiet. The souvenir shops and high-end boutiques are still shuttered. I steer my truck toward the harbor, my mind calculating logistics purely out of habit. I only intend to retrieve a few personal items: my grandmother brass compass, a handful of framed photographs, and a custom leather apron a local sailmaker stitched for me on my 30th birthday. Things that belong to Charlene, not to the corporate entity of Jung Coastal Provisions. The air at the harbor smells of diesel fuel and low tide a sharp metallic tang that usually feels like home. I pull my truck up to the rear loading dock. The wooden planks are slick with morning drizzle. Sitting right on the edge of the wet wood, exposed to the damp coastal air, is a cheap cardboard box. The bottom is already soaking through, sagging under the weight of my belongings. I cut the engine. The sound of seagulls crying overhead feels sharp and piercing. I step out of the cab, my boots thudding against the wet pavement. I reach into the soggy box. My grandmother brass compass sits next to a damp, ruined notebook. He did not even bother to wrap the glass picture frames. The heavy metal door of the receiving bay groans open. Derek steps out holding a plastic clipboard. He wears an expensive cashmere quarter-zip sweater and designer leather loafers. Shoes that will be ruined by fish scale and dock grease within an hour. He leans against the doorframe, projecting a practiced, hollow authority. "You left a mess in the office," he says, clicking a gold pen with his thumb. I pick up my damp box, feeling the wet cardboard yield under my fingers. I left a functioning business. Derek snorts, shaking his head. "You left a glorified mom-and-pop shop." I spent all night looking at your margins. You coddle these local suppliers. You pay premium rates for goods we can source cheaper elsewhere. It is bad business. Oh, and by the way, I kept your little dramatic prop from yesterday. He points his gold pen toward the office window. Through the glass, I can see the wall directly behind the manager desk. The crisp $1 bill I left on the counter yesterday now hangs in a cheap black frame. My first dollar made as CEO. Derek smirks, crossing his arms. A nice reminder of where we started before we take this brand national. I do not grace his delusion with a response. Instead, I watch the service road behind him. A heavy, refrigerated box truck backs into the loading zone. The air brakes hiss loudly, echoing off the brick walls. The driver, a broad-shouldered man named Sal, who has delivered fresh-caught clams to this dock for 8 consecutive years, jumps down from the cab. Sal looks at me, holding my soggy box, then looks at Derek in his pristine cashmere sweater. Morning Charlene Sal nods his brow, furrowing beneath his weathered cap. Where do you want the little necks today? I do not work here anymore, Sal, I reply, keeping my tone perfectly even. You will have to ask the new CEO. Sal shifts his gaze to my brother. Derek stands up straight, clearing his throat, trying to summon a commanding presence. Just put the pallets in the walk-in freezer, Derek commands, gesturing vaguely toward the dark warehouse interior. Sal crosses his thick arms. I do not load the walk-in. My contract is for dock delivery only. You inspect the product, you sign the manifest, and you load the crates. That is how your sister and I always handled it. Derek flushes. The tips of his ears turn a bright pink. He steps forward, his designer loafers slipping slightly on a patch of wet, decaying seaweed. He looks at the towering stacks of iced crates inside the back of the truck, realizing he has no idea how to operate the manual pallet jack, nor does he want to ruin his expensive clothes lifting dripping boxes of seafood. Actually, Derek says, his voice losing its confident timbre. We do not need the clams today, or the custom tackle from your cousin. Cancel the pending orders, all of them. Sal stares at him, his jaw tightening. Cancel? I already harvested these this morning. You have a standing weekend order. We are pivoting, Derek says, pulling a glossy catalog from under his clipboard. He thrusts it toward Sal. Local sourcing is too expensive. I found an overseas distributor. We can get frozen shrimp and plastic souvenir buoys for a fraction of your cost. The tourists will never know the difference. I stand by my truck, holding my damp box, and watch a fundamental destruction of legacy unfold in real time. Young Coastal Provisions built its pristine reputation on authenticity. The hand-carved wooden lures the dayboat scallops, the artisanal sea salt, crafted by local families. These elements were the soul of the store. Derek is looking at a catalog filled with cheap imported trinkets. He truly believes he can replace true coastal culture with a shiny artificial facade just because it yields a better margin on a spreadsheet. The parallel strikes me with profound clarity. It is exactly what Albert and Vivian did to me. They discarded the authentic, hard-working foundation of their family and replaced it with Derek, a shiny, expensive, superficial facade that looks great on paper but holds zero actual value beneath the surface. They bought into a cheap imitation of success, and now they are forcing the business to do the same. Sal looks utterly disgusted. He spits a wad of gum onto the pavement, landing mere inches from Derek's expensive shoes. Good luck with your plastic lobsters, kid, Sal growls. He climbs back into the cab of his truck and slams the heavy metal door. The engine roars to life, blowing a thick cloud of dark diesel exhaust directly into Derek's face. Derek coughs, waving the smoke away, his pristine image fracturing for just a second. He glares at me, his eyes narrowing, as if I somehow orchestrated his humiliation. Do not come back here, Charlene, he snaps, turning on his heel and retreating into the safety of the warehouse. I slide my cardboard box onto the passenger seat of my truck. The wet cardboard tears, spilling my grandmother compass onto the floorboard. I pick it up, wiping the moisture from the scratched glass face. The needle spins wildly before finally settling, pointing true north. I start the engine, leaving the waterfront behind. I feel a strange sense of clarity settling over my shoulders. The systemic war has begun, and my brother has just fired his first shot directly into his own foot. My phone vibrates in the center console as I wait at a red light. I glance down. A new text message lights up the screen. It is from my mother, Vivian. "Sunday dinner tomorrow at 6. We expect you to be there. We have a new role for you." The demand sits there on the glowing screen, arrogant and presumptuous. They steal my life work on Friday, orchestrate my humiliation on Saturday, and expect me to serve them on Sunday? My pulse remains slow and steady. I put the truck in gear and drive forward. They want a family dinner. I will give them one they will never forget. The iron gates of the Ocean Drive estate loom ahead, casting long, dark shadows across the crushed gravel driveway. I park my 10-year-old truck next to Derek-leased silver sports car. The imposing 3-story colonial house stands as a monument to coastal wealth. Crisp white trim, perfectly manicured hedges, and expansive bay windows overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Every single brick, every slate roof tile, and every blade of landscaping grass was paid for by the profits I generated. My parents bought this property 7 years ago, right after I secured the exclusive distribution contract with the local commercial fishing fleet. They took the dividends, I took the night shifts. I step up to the heavy mahogany front door and turn the brass handle. The entryway smells of roasted lamb, fresh rosemary, and a subtle undertone of expensive furniture polish. It is the scent of manufactured perfection. My mother, Vivian, stands in the arched doorway of the formal dining room. She wears a tailored silk blouse and a string of pearls holding a crystal wine glass. She offers a tight, practiced smile that does not reach her eyes. "You are late, Charlene," she says, turning on her heel and gliding back into the dining room. "Dinner is already served." I follow her into the room. The long mahogany table is set with fine china and polished silver. Albert sits at the head carving the roast with precise, measured slices. Derek sits to his right, tapping lazily on his smartphone, ignoring the meal in front of him. Nobody acknowledges the brutal severance from Friday. Nobody mentions the humiliating digital lockout from Saturday morning. In their minds, those events were mere administrative adjustments. I take the empty seat across from my brother. For a long moment, the only sound in the room is the clinking of silver against porcelain. Albert places a thick slice of lamb on my plate. I do not pick up my fork. "Let us skip the pleasantries," Albert says, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "We called you here because your brother has audited the logistics of the store. He has identified several operational inefficiencies." Derek sets his phone face down on the table. He leans back, crossing his arms over his chest. "You left the inventory logs in a chaotic state, Charlene. The local suppliers are disorganized. I spent hours trying to make sense of your outdated filing methods. I need someone to untangle the mess you left behind." I stare at him. The system is a state-of-the-art cloud database. The only mess is his profound inability to understand basic supply chain management. Vivian leans forward, placing a manicured hand over mine. Her skin feels cold. "We know you are hurt, sweetheart. Change is always difficult. But Derek is the CEO now, and he cannot be bogged down with manual labor and vendor hand-holding. His focus must remain on the macroscopic vision. Corporate scaling, brand expansion." She pauses, letting her words hang in the air like a generous gift. "We are willing to offer you a new position. Inventory assistant. You would report directly to Derek. You know the fishermen, and you know how to stock the shelves. It is a perfect fit. We are even willing to offer you a competitive hourly wage. The sheer audacity of the demotion hangs in the dining room. They stole the company I built, handed it to the son who never worked a day in his life, and now expect me to return as his subordinate hourly employee to ensure he does not fail? You owe it to the family, Vivian continues, her voice taking on that sharp, familiar edge of manufactured guilt. Raised you. We provided for you. This store is our legacy, and it is incredibly selfish of you to walk away just because you are jealous of your brother's success. We have sacrificed so much for you. For 60 seconds, the dining room fades away. The scent of roasted lamb is replaced by the suffocating stench of stagnant salt water and rotting cardboard. My mind slips backward in time. It is a Tuesday in late May, 12 years ago. The day of my college graduation. A freak coastal storm had rolled into the bay overnight, pushing a tidal surge directly into the lower streets of the harbor. The basement of Jung Coastal Provisions flooded with 3 feet of freezing Atlantic water. While my classmates were putting on their caps and gowns, laughing with their families on the sunny campus green across the state, I was standing waist-deep in freezing sludge. I spent 14 hours operating a rented water pump, dragging ruined boxes of merchandise up the narrow wooden stairs. My hands were blistered and bleeding. My legs were numb from the cold. I had called Albert and Vivian 4 times, begging for help. They did not answer. Hours later, Vivian sent a single brief text message. "We cannot make your commencement ceremony, honey. The country club is hosting a charity luncheon, and we already RSVP'd. We will celebrate another time." There was no other time. They never took me to dinner. They never asked to see my diploma. I saved the store from ruin that day, securing the foundation of the wealth they now flaunt. The memory shifts forward, contrasting sharply with a pristine afternoon just 2 years ago. Derek MBA commencement. Albert and Vivian rented a private limousine to drive us to the university. They hosted a catered reception on the lawn. During the toast, Albert beamed with pride, holding a velvet box. He handed it to Derek. Inside rested a $10,000 luxury watch, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Albert placed his hand on Derek's shoulder, declaring him the future of the Young family. The emotional wound from those contrasting memories is deep. But as I sit at this polished mahogany table, the pain does not break me. It hardens. The final lingering threads of familial obligation snap, crystallizing into a cold and unyielding resolve. I look at the 3 people sitting around the table. They do not view me as a daughter, a sister, or even a human being. They view me as a utility, a tool to be used until it is dull and then discarded in favor of something shiny. I look down at the untouched plate of roasted lamb. I place my hands on the edge of the table and slowly push the expensive china away from me. The ceramic plate scrapes loudly against the polished wood, silencing Vivian mid-sentence. My pulse remains perfectly steady, 60 beats per minute. "I am not your inventory assistant," I state, keeping my voice low and devoid of any emotional fluctuation. "I am not your employee, and I am certainly not the safety net for a CEO who cannot distinguish a manifest from a menu." Albert's face darkens. His jaw muscles jump. "Do not be insolent, Charlene. We are throwing you a lifeline. If you walk out that door, you get nothing. No inheritance, no support, no family." I stand up my chair, sliding backward on the plush Persian rug. "You already gave me nothing, Albert. You gave me $1. I bought my freedom and you bought a liability." Derek scoffs, rolling his eyes. "You are bluffing. You have no savings, no other skills, and no job. You will be calling us by Wednesday begging for those hourly shifts." I lean over the table, planting my palms flat on the wood, bringing my face inches from my brother. "I built the relationships that keep your shelves stocked. I know every fisherman, every supplier, and every harbor master in this state by their first name. You do not even know what time the delivery trucks arrive. You think you own the business because you own the paperwork. You are about to learn a very painful lesson about how coastal commerce actually works. I straighten my posture, buttoning my wool sweater. I look at Vivian, whose mouth is slightly open in shock, and then at Albert, who is glaring at me with undisguised fury. In this exact moment, they cease to be my parents. I formally reclassify my own blood relatives as hostile targets in a war they started. Enjoy the roast, I say softly. It might be the last meal you can afford for a while. I turn my back on them and walk out of the dining room. My boots echo on the hardwood floor of the entryway. I open the heavy mahogany door and step out into the crisp evening air. The coastal wind whips across my face, carrying the scent of salt and impending storms. I climb into my truck, start the engine, and drive away from the estate without looking back in the rearview mirror. They believe I am walking away with zero leverage. They have no idea that the true foundation of young coastal provisions just left the building, and the local harbor is about to exact a brutal toll on the new management. I drive toward the waterfront, my mind calculating the next move. The dominoes are lined up, waiting to fall. By tomorrow morning, the sun will rise over the docks, and my brother will realize that stealing a crown does not grant you the loyalty of the kingdom. The quiet strike is imminent. The digital clock on my nightstand reads 4:30 in the morning. The apartment is wrapped in the heavy quiet that only exists just before the coastal sunrise. My phone vibrates against the polished wood of the bedside table, the harsh buzzing sound startling me awake. I reach out, squinting against the bright blue light of the screen. The caller ID displays Captain Russo. I swipe the screen and press the phone to my ear. I do not even get the chance to say hello. Tell me this is some kind of sick joke, Charlene. Rousseau has a voice forged by 3 decades of breathing diesel fumes and frozen Atlantic gales. He is a third-generation Newport fisherman. His hands are scarred from rogue fishing lines and hauling traps in sub-zero temperatures. This morning, that weathered voice is thick with a simmering, quiet rage. I sit up, pulling the quilt around my shoulders. What did he do, Captain? He sent me an email at midnight, Rousseau growls. An email! He did not even have the spine to call me or meet me on the dock. Your brother attached a spreadsheet. He highlighted my invoice from last week in yellow. Then he added a note saying my pricing structure is inefficient for his new corporate model. He demanded a 30% discount on all dayboat scallops and lobster tails moving forward. He said it was a non-negotiable volume adjustment. I close my eyes, letting out a slow breath. A 30% cut would eliminate Rousseau's entire profit margin. It would mean he was burning expensive marine fuel just to deliver free seafood to my brother. I called the kid Rousseau. Continues, the anger vibrating through the phone speaker. He answered on the third ring. I asked him if he understood the cost of diesel. I asked him if he knew what a premium local catch was worth. Do you know what he told me? He called me a gig worker. He said if I did not accept his new terms, he would just open his vendor app and find a cheaper boat. My chest tightens not from surprise, but from the sheer staggering depth of Derek ignorance. You do not order premium Atlantic seafood from an app. You earn it through relationships. 5 years ago, during the devastating blizzard of February, a rogue wave cracked the portside hull of Rousseau primary fishing vessel. The local bank refused to extend his credit line. He was facing a ruined season and potential bankruptcy. I did not ask Albert or Vivian for permission. I opened the store safe, drove to the harbor in blinding snow, and handed Rousseau a cashier check from my own personal savings to cover the shipyard repair bill. He paid me back within 6 months, bringing me the finest catch the ocean had to offer, week after week. He never sold his premium scallops to any other market in Rhode Island. That kind of loyalty is not bought. It is forged in ice and salt water. Derek thinks a spreadsheet rules the ocean. I am sorry, Captain, I say softly. I am no longer managing the accounts. I know Russo sighs, the anger giving way to a weary sadness. Word travels fast on the docks. I am pulling my trucks, Charlene. I ordered my crew to bypass your loading bay this morning. I will not deliver a single shell to that arrogant kid. The Young family account is dead to me. Thank you for letting me know, I reply. Stay safe out there today. I disconnect the call and place the phone back on the nightstand. The first domino has fallen. Young Coastal Provisions is famous for its fresh seafood counter. Without Russo, that counter will be empty by lunchtime. I do not go back to sleep. I brew a pot of dark roast coffee and stand by my apartment window, watching the sun drag itself over the gray horizon. The sky bleeds from deep purple into a pale, bruised blue. At 9 o'clock, my phone rings again. This time, it is Irene. Irene runs a small artisanal kitchen on the edge of town. She harvests wild beach plums and turns them into incredible preserves, honey reductions, and sea salt scrubs. Her jars are a staple of the coastal tourist trade. Visitors buy them by the dozen to take a piece of Rhode Island back home. She is crying when I answer the phone, not from sadness, but from profound insult. Charlene Irene whispers, her voice shaking. I just received a certified letter from the store, a formal vendor mandate. Take a breath, Irene. Read it to me. She rustles the heavy paper on her end of the line. Derek wrote that my packaging is too rustic. He said handwritten labels are detrimental to his modernized brand image. He demanded I switch to standardized barcoded plastic containers by Friday. He also demanded I drop my wholesale price to match factory-produced jelly. He threatened to cancel my shelf space if I did not comply. I picture Irene standing in her warm kitchen surrounded by glass jars and the sweet smell of boiling fruit. I remember sitting in the humid gymnasium of the local high school 3 years ago, watching her daughter walk across the graduation stage. I bought that girl a silver anchor necklace to celebrate her diploma. Irene wept and hugged me in the parking lot, calling me family.
Pull your inventory, Irene,
I tell her, my voice firm and unwavering.
Drive your van to the store and take every single jar off those shelves. You are an artisan, not a factory line. Do not let him demean your craft.
I am already loading the boxes, she says, her tone hardening with newfound resolve.
He will not sell another drop of my jam.
By noon, the third strike arrives. It is a text message from Matteo. Matteo is a gruff, quiet man who works with heavy waxed canvas and raw leather. He stitches the custom marine gear and durable tote bags that wealthy yachtsmen flock to our store to purchase. A single bag of his sells for hundreds of dollars. The text message is brief and lethal. Your brother told me to switch to synthetic nylon to speed up my production cycle. He called my stitching inefficient. I just drove my truck to the loading dock and physically removed my display racks. Call me when you land on your feet. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. Seafood, artisanal gifts, high-end retail gear. The 3 pillars of the business are gone in a span of 8 hours. The local supply chain has staged a bloodless mutiny, and Derek is the architect of his own demise. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my screen lights up with a covert message from Sarah. Sarah is a 19-year-old cashier I hired 2 summers ago to run the front register. She is quiet, observant, and intensely loyal. She sends a quick, blurry photograph taken from behind the counter. The image shows the center aisles of the store. The sprawling, crushed ice display is barren, holding nothing but melted water. The wooden shelves where Irene preserves used to sit are entirely empty. Matteo custom leather display corner is a vacant patch of bare cedar floorboards. A moment later, Sarah sends an audio clip recorded from her pocket. The sound is muffled, but the voices are unmistakable. I can hear Vivian speaking, her tone laced with rising panic. Derek, the shelves are bare. The weekend tourists will be here in 3 days. We have nothing to sell them but bait and soda." Then comes my brother voice. It is dripping with smug confidence, utterly devoid of reality. "Relax," Mother Derek says, his dress shoes clicking against the hardwood floor as he paces. "They are just playing hardball. It is a classic negotiation tactic. These local bumpkins think they hold the leverage. Give them 48 hours, they will come crawling back and accept my pricing terms when they realize they desperately need our foot traffic to survive. We hold the real estate. We hold the power." I listened to the recording 3 times. The dramatic irony is almost poetic. Derek stands in the middle of a dying store, wearing his expensive suit, lecturing our parents about leverage. He assures them that the suppliers will break. He genuinely believes that fear and corporate pressure will force proud, generational workers to bend the knee. He does not realize that men like Rousseau would rather sink their own boats than work for a man who disrespects them. He does not know that Irene and Matteo value their dignity far more than his shelf space. The audience in that store might believe his arrogant promises, but I know the cold, hard truth. The suppliers despise him. They are never coming back. But the tourist season waits for no one. The weekend is looming like a dark storm on the horizon. Derek cannot keep the doors open with empty shelves. His pride will not allow him to admit defeat. Panic will soon set in, pushing him to make a desperate and fatal decision. He will have to find inventory, fast, and he will look for the cheapest, quickest solution available, sacrificing the only thing that actually matters in this town. Wednesday morning arrives with the heavy hum of commercial diesel engines echoing across the harbor. I am sitting at my kitchen island with a cup of black tea when my phone screen lights up with a new text from Sarah. She is working the opening shift at the register. The message contains no words, only 3 blurry photographs taken from the loading dock. I open the images and study them carefully. The pristine wooden receiving bay, where Captain Rousseau used to unload crates of fresh, shimmering scallops directly from his salt-wash deck, is now occupied by a towering 18-wheeler. The truck bears the logo of a national discount distributor. The driver is pushing a mechanical pallet jack stacked high with cardboard boxes wrapped in thick industrial plastic. My brother has realized that empty shelves are a death sentence for a retail business. Unable to secure quality goods from the proud local suppliers he insulted, Derek has pivoted to the fastest and cheapest alternative available on the internet. The bastardization of our family legacy begins before the sun even reaches its peak in the sky. Sarah continues to send covert updates throughout the afternoon. She hides her phone behind the checkout counter, typing out frantic descriptions of the new inventory as Derek forces her to unpack the shipments. They are stocking the artisanal preserve display with jars of high-fructose corn syrup jelly, Sarah writes. The labels are printed on cheap, glossy paper. They look like something you would find at a highway gas station. A few minutes later, another text arrives. Matteo, beautiful cedar display racks are being filled with thin nylon bags. They smell like chemical dye and factory dust. The stitching is already fraying on the handles. Then comes the final, most devastating update. Sarah sends a video of the seafood counter. For 15 years, that glass case was the crown jewel of Young Coastal Provisions. It held wild-caught Atlantic lobsters, fresh little-neck clams, and thick fillets of striped bass resting on a bed of pristine crushed ice. In the video, the fresh ice is gone. The display case hums loudly, functioning merely as a generic freezer. Inside sit stacked boxes of farm-raised shrimp imported from thousands of miles away, entombed in opaque blocks of gray ice. I set my phone down and look out my apartment window toward the bay. The unique atmosphere of Newport relies on a very delicate economic ecosystem. The summer months bring a wave of out-of-town tourists, but the true foundation of the local economy is sustained by the wealthy residents who live here year-round. These are people who understand the distinct difference between factory-produced trash and handcrafted heritage. They do not mind paying a premium price, but they demand an authentic experience in return. By Thursday afternoon, the local reaction unfolds exactly as I anticipated. Sarah sends a long audio message detailing a visit from Montgomery. Montgomery is a retired naval architect who has shopped at our store every Thursday for a decade. He is a man of quiet routine and generational wealth. He always buys a pound of fresh scallops and a jar of local honey. According to Sarah, Montgomery walks through the front door wearing his usual cable-knit sweater and weathered deck shoes. He stops near the entrance, his brow furrowing as he takes in the sight of neon plastic buoys hanging from the rafters. The air inside the store no longer smells of roasted espresso and ocean brine. It smells like stale cardboard and industrial packaging. Montgomery approaches the seafood counter where Derek is standing, tapping away on his expensive smartphone. Montgomery looks at the frozen blocks of imported shrimp. He does not raise his voice. He simply stares at the freezer case, then looks directly at Derek. "Where are the dayboat scallops?" Montgomery asks. Derek smiles, offering that hollow practice charm he learned in his business seminars. "We are streamlining our supply chain, sir. The frozen shrimp offer a much better value point for our customers." Montgomery does not argue. He does not complain to the manager. He simply sets his empty canvas shopping tote down on the floor, turns on his heel, and walks out the front door. The brass bell chimes his departure, signaling the permanent loss of a loyal patron. Word spreads through the historic district like a coastal wildfire. Within 48 hours, the wealthy locals establish an unspoken boycott. The foot traffic in the store plummets to a historic low. Derek watches the daily revenue reports crash. Panic begins to fracture his confident facade. His ego will not allow him to admit that his inventory choices are driving customers away. Instead, he decides the problem is a lack of modern marketing. He convinces Albert and Vivian that the local demographic is too small anyway, and they need to capture the attention of the digital generation. He funnels a staggering amount of the store cash reserves into a flashy social media advertising campaign. Sarah screen records the advertisements as they pop up on her phone and forwards them to me. The videos are a catastrophic embarrassment to our family name. The advertisements feature loud, royalty-free pop music and erratic camera angles. Neon text flashes across the screen, boasting about discount prices and clearance sales. Derek has hired a cheap digital marketing agency to target vacationing teenagers and budget tourists. The ads portray our historic, respected maritime market as a tacky roadside souvenir trap. This digital desperation alienates the old money demographic even further. The yacht club members and historical society patrons see the obnoxious flashing videos on their community feeds. The young name, once synonymous with quality and coastal pride, becomes a punchline in private group chats across the harbor. I sit at my kitchen island, bathed in the glow of my laptop screen. I open a blank spreadsheet and begin documenting his frantic mismanagement. I type in the estimated cost of his digital advertising campaign based on current market rates for targeted coastal algorithms. I compare that daily burn rate to the dismal revenue numbers Sarah covertly provides. The math is brutal and undeniable. Derek believes that business is simply a game of margins. He thinks that if he buys a plastic keychain for pennies and sells it for $1, he is winning. He is entirely blind to the reality of coastal commerce. Authenticity is the only currency that justifies the overhead of operating a brick-and-mortar store on the Newport waterfront. You cannot charge a premium price for something a tourist can order online from their couch. He is burning our historic brand to the ground, trading a decade of prestige for a few quick sales that do not even cover the cost of keeping the lights on. As the weekend draws to a close, the financial damage becomes impossible to ignore. The store is packed with cheap plastic inventory that nobody wants to buy. The cash registers remain quiet. The expensive social media ads generate thousands of views, but yield almost zero actual foot traffic. The tourists who do wander in buy a single bottle of soda and leave without spending real money. Derek sits in the back office, staring at a negative balance sheet. His pristine corporate narrative is collapsing around him. A man possessed by that level of arrogance will never look in the mirror and accept the blame for his own failures. His mind frantically searches for an external target. He needs a scapegoat to present to Albert and Vivian. He needs to convince them that he is a victim of sabotage. I close my laptop and finish the last cold sip of my tea. My brother is cornered, bleeding cash and desperate to regain control of the narrative. He cannot fix the supply chain, so he will try to destroy the person he believes broke it. He is preparing to cross a line that cannot be uncrossed, mistaking a piece of paper for genuine power. The true test of my resolve is about to arrive in a sealed envelope. The knock on my door comes just after 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. It is not the casual tap of a neighbor or the hurried rhythm of a mail carrier. It is a firm, rhythmic pounding that vibrates through the thin walls of my coastal apartment. I set down my tea, walk across the faded rug, and turn the deadbolt. A courier stands in the hallway. He wears a crisp uniform and holds a thick, rigid envelope. He does not smile. He extends an electronic clipboard and a stylus, asking for my signature. I sign my name, the digital ink dragging across the screen, and take the package. The envelope is heavy. It bears the embossed gold logo of a pristine Providence law firm, the kind of firm that occupies top-floor corner offices and bills by the minute. I close the door and walk back to the kitchen island. My fingertips trace the thick watermarked paper. I slide a butter knife under the flap and pull out a stack of documents stapled together with a heavy silver clasp. The heading is printed in stark, bold letters: Cease and desist. My eyes scan the crisp black text. The legal jargon is dense, engineered to intimidate and disorient the reader. I pick out the terrifying phrases buried within the paragraphs: tortious interference, corporate sabotage, financial damages. The document accuses me of orchestrating a coordinated boycott, claiming I manipulated the local supply chain to ruin the profitability of Jung coastal provisions. The final page features a demand. I must publicly endorse the new management and command the vendors to return, or face a lawsuit that will hold me personally liable for the lost revenue. Fear is a physical sensation. It does not begin in the mind. It starts in the stomach, a sudden drop that hollows out your core, followed by a tight constriction in the throat. My hands develop a slight tremor, the pages rattle softly against the granite countertop. A lawsuit. Derek is not fighting me in the store anymore. He has weaponized our parents' bank accounts, hiring corporate litigators to crush me beneath a mountain of legal fees. I know how this game works. You do not need to be guilty to lose everything. You just need to run out of money before the judge issues a ruling. The pacing of my afternoon grinds to a halt. The adrenaline fades, leaving behind a cold, creeping dread. I spend the next 6 hours sitting at the kitchen island, surrounded by scattered bank statements, old tax returns, and my personal ledger. I run the numbers over and over, hoping the math will somehow change. I have a decent savings account. I built a modest nest egg by living frugally, driving a 10-year-old truck and cooking my own meals while working 80-hour weeks at the store. But corporate litigation costs hundreds of dollars an hour. A prolonged discovery phase would drain my accounts within months. If they drag this out, I could lose my apartment. I could be left with nothing. Night falls, casting long shadows across the living room. I do not turn on the lights. I sit in the dark, watching the distant beacon of the harbor lighthouse sweep across the black water. I think about my brother. I think about how easy his life has always been. Whenever he overdrawn his checking account during his undergraduate years, Albert simply wired him funds. When he crashed his leased sedan, Vivian bought him a new one. His mistakes were always subsidized. Now, his profound failure to run a business is being subsidized by a high-priced legal team, and I am the designated target. The injustice burns, but the fear remains. I do not sleep. I watch the digital clock shift from 2 to 3, then 4 in the morning. By 9 o'clock the next day, I am sitting in a worn leather chair inside a small, dusty office above a hardware store on Thames Street. The office belongs to Attorney Sullivan. He is a local maritime lawyer, a man who has spent 40 years mediating disputes between fishermen, shipyards, and coastal landlords. His desk is buried under stacks of yellow legal pads and tide charts. The room smells of old paper, stale pipe tobacco, and ocean dampness. Sullivan adjusts his wire-rimmed glasses and reads the cease and desist letter in silence. The ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner amplifies the tension in the room. I grip the armrests of my chair, waiting for him to deliver the final blow. I wait for him to tell me how much of a retainer he needs to draft a defense. Instead, Sullivan lowers the document. A dry, amused chuckle escapes his lips. "Tell me about your vendor agreements, Charlene," he says, leaning back in his creaking chair. "How were the contracts structured with Captain Russo and the artisan suppliers?" I swallow the lump in my throat. "We did not use formal contracts. The local supply chain does not operate like that. It is all handshake agreements and month-to-month invoices. If they caught a good haul, we bought it. If we needed a specific order, they filled it. We built trust over a decade." Sullivan tosses the expensive watermarked paper onto his desk with a dismissive flick of his wrist. It lands next to a half-empty mug of coffee. "Then your brother has nothing," Sullivan states. His voice is firm, carrying the quiet authority of a man who knows the law better than the expensive suits in Providence. "You cannot interfere with a contract that does not exist. A handshake agreement means either party can walk away at any time for any reason. The suppliers chose to stop doing business with Jung Coastal Provisions. You did not break a legal bond because there was no bond to break." The tight band across my chest suddenly snaps. A rush of oxygen fills my lungs. I stare at the letter on the desk. "So this is fake?" I ask, my voice trembling slightly. "It is a paper tiger," Sullivan replies, taking off his glasses and wiping them with a microfiber cloth. "It is a scare tactic designed by lawyers who get paid by the word. They know they have no case. They are betting that the sight of their firm letterhead will terrify you into compliance. They want you to panic. They want you to pick up the phone, call your brother, and beg for a settlement." I look at the embossed gold logo on the envelope. The fear that kept me awake all night evaporates, replaced by a profound and chilling clarity. Derek is bleeding cash. His store is filled with rotting imported inventory. His customers have abandoned him. He is desperate, and this letter is his final, hollow flex of power. He expects me to surrender. I stand up, reaching across the desk to retrieve the document. I slide it back into the thick envelope. "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan," I say, pulling a checkbook from my purse to pay for the consultation. "You just gave me exactly what I needed." Sullivan waves my checkbook away. "Keep your money, Charlene. Just make sure you do not reply to that letter. Do not give them a single word." I drive back to my apartment with the windows rolled down. The coastal air feels lighter today. The fear is entirely gone, leaving behind a sharp, focused strategy. I walk into my kitchen, open the bottom drawer of my desk, and drop the thick manila envelope inside. I close the drawer with a solid, satisfying thud. I will not hire a defense attorney. I will not draft a polite refusal. I will not send an email denying the accusations. I will give Derek a black void. In the world of corporate posturing, silence is the most terrifying response imaginable. A narcissist like my brother feeds on reaction. He needs to know his threats landed. He expects me to lash out in anger or crumble in fear. By offering him pure silence, I am stripping away his perceived control. He will sit in that office, staring at his phone, wondering if his expensive legal gamble worked. The lack of a response will gnawed his ego, driving his anxiety higher with every passing hour. He will imagine all the ways I might be plotting against him. His paranoia will accelerate his downfall, and I will not have to lift a finger to push him. But I am not finished. Surviving a threat is only the first step. It is time to go on the offensive. The local suppliers are waiting for a signal, and the empty storefronts along the harbor are ripe for a new anchor tenant. I need to gather my allies, but I must do it in the shadows. Derek has spies watching the harbor, eager to report my movements. I need a distraction. I need to give him a false sense of security before I strike the final blow. The board is set, and it is my turn to move the pieces. In a coastal town like Newport, secrecy is a fleeting illusion. The salt air carries gossip faster than any radio broadcast. I know my brother better than he knows himself. Derek lacks the patience for long-term strategic planning, but he possesses an endless supply of paranoia. He will, inevitably, send someone to watch my movements, eager to confirm his own superiority and report my downfall to our parents. I decide to give him exactly the narrative his fragile ego craves. I drive my truck away from the harbor, heading several miles inland. The crisp ocean breeze fades, replaced by the stagnant heat of suburban asphalt. I pull into the parking lot of a decaying strip mall. The plaza features a defunct dry cleaner, a struggling laundromat, and a vacant storefront with faded leasing signs taped to the dirty front glass. It is a commercial graveyard, the perfect stage for a calculated performance. I step out of the vehicle, holding a yellow legal pad and a tape measure. I walk toward the empty storefront, intentionally slumping my posture. I trace the cracked window frames, scribbling meaningless numbers onto the paper. I shake my head, projecting an aura of total defeat and profound exhaustion. Out of the corner of my eye, I spot a familiar silver sedan idling near the highway exit. The driver attempts to slouch down behind the steering wheel, but the tinted window is rolled halfway down. I recognize the man immediately. It is Kevin, a junior clerk Derek hired straight out of a university fraternity last summer. Kevin holds up his smartphone, pointing the camera lens directly at me. He is documenting my supposed desperation. I let him capture the footage. I stand in front of the peeling paint, looking overwhelmed and broken. Derek wants to believe I am ruined, banished to a landlocked concrete box far from the lucrative tourist waterfront. By feeding him this specific lie, I am buying myself the most valuable asset in any war: uninterrupted time. Kevin puts his phone down and drives away, speeding back to the harbor to deliver the good news to the new chief executive officer. With the decoy deployed, I toss the legal pad onto the passenger seat and drive back toward the water. My actual destination is the rusted perimeter of the commercial shipyards. The Anchor Grill is a small, weather-beaten diner nestled between two towering dry docks. The exterior is coated in a permanent layer of sea salt and diesel exhaust. It is a place where wealthy tourists never venture. I walk through the front door, the heavy hinges groaning in protest. The air inside smells of fried clams, strong black coffee, and damp wool. I spot them sitting in a circular booth in the far corner. Captain Russo, Irene, and Matteo. The three foundational pillars of the local coastal supply chain. I slide into the vinyl booth across from Russo. The table is sticky, bearing the circular stains of countless coffee mugs. Nobody speaks for a long moment. The silence carries a heavy, unspoken burden. Irene stares down at her tea. Her hands are dusted with powdered sugar and flour, the skin around her knuckles raw from scrubbing industrial pots. The boycott is taking a severe toll on her livelihood. We have stood together for years, but principals do not pay the utility bills. She produces artisan preserves in small, perishable batches. Without the foot traffic of a premium market, her inventory is sitting in a warehouse, slowly approaching its expiration date. Matteo sits next to her, his fingers stained dark brown from raw leather dye. He rubs his temples, looking thoroughly exhausted. I had to furlough 2 of my apprentices this morning, Matteo says, his voice thick with regret. The summer season is our primary revenue window. We are holding the line, Charlene. None of us will sell a single item to your brother. But the financial bleeding is real. We need a distribution channel or we are going to start missing mortgage payments by the 1st of the month. Russo takes a slow sip of his dark coffee. He sets the thick ceramic mug down on the table, his weathered eyes locking onto mine. He is the unofficial leader of the harbor fleet. When he speaks, the docks listen. We did not walk away just to spite the new management, Russo states, his tone steady and resolute. We walked away because we trust you. You know the tides, you know the product, and you know us. But Matteo is right. We are withering on the vine out here. We need you to lead us. We need a new anchor. I look at the 3 of them. These are not just business associates. They are the heartbeat of the historic district. I owe them a viable path forward. I am looking at properties, I tell them, keeping my voice low. I need a location with high visibility and direct dock access. But Derek is watching the market closely. If I make a public bid on a premium waterfront space, he will try to block it with family funds just to keep me out of the game. A slow, knowing smile spreads across Russo's scarred face. He reaches into the pocket of his heavy canvas jacket. You do not need to make a public bid, he says. Russo slides a heavy, ornate brass key across the scratched formica table. The metal gleams under the flickering fluorescent lights of the diner. It looks ancient, carrying the weight of generational maritime history. I stare at the key. What is this? I ask. It belongs to the Harper Boathouse, Russo replies. My heart skips a beat. The Harper Boathouse is a legendary piece of commercial real estate. It sits on the most coveted corner of the prime tourist waterfront, featuring sprawling cedar decks and deep-water docks that allow fishing vessels to unload their daily catch directly into the building. It is twice the size of Jung Coastal Provisions. It has been shuttered for 6 months after the previous tenant retired. The landlord is Silas Thorne Matteo, chimes in, leaning forward over his mug. Silas is an old salt. He despises corporate developers and wealthy summer tourists. He refused to list the property on the open market because he did not want a chain restaurant or a plastic souvenir shop taking over his family building. Russo taps the brass key with his thick index finger. I had a few drinks with Silas last night. We talked about your situation. Silas hates what your brother is doing to the local culture. He wants a respected fixture in that boathouse. He wants someone who respects the harbor. He gave me this key and told me to give it to you. The lease is yours if you want it. The magnitude of the offer settles over the table. This is not just a chance to survive, it is an opportunity to conquer. The boathouse is the only location in Newport capable of overshadowing my former family store. If I open my doors on that corner, with these suppliers backing me, I will not just compete with Derek. I will eclipse him entirely. I look at Irene, who offers a hopeful, desperate nod. I look at Matteo, who straightens his posture, ready to get back to work. Finally, I look at Russo. His eyes challenge me to accept the mantle of leadership. The internal hesitation vanishes. The grief over my lost family legacy is replaced by a cold, searing ambition. My legacy was never the brick-and-mortar building my parents owned. My legacy sits at this sticky diner table. It is the network, the trust, and the resilient community I built over 15 years of relentless dedication. I reach across the table and wrap my fingers around the cold brass key. The metal feels solid, heavy, with undeniable promise. "Tell Silas I will sign the paperwork tomorrow morning," I say, slipping the key into my pocket. "Tell your apprentices to come back to the workshop, Mateo, and Irene. Start boiling the preserves. We are going to need every single jar you can produce." A collective exhale of relief washes over the booth. The suppliers sit up taller, their eyes burning with renewed energy. The silent strike is over. The counteroffensive has officially begun. I leave the diner a few minutes later, the coastal wind whipping my hair across my face. I walk to my truck, feeling the brass key resting in my pocket like a loaded weapon. Derek thinks I am defeated, wandering around a decaying strip mall miles from the ocean. He is sitting in a rotting store celebrating a hollow victory, unaware that the entire harbor fleet is mobilizing against him. But this war will not remain in the shadows for long. Moving into the Harper Boathouse requires permits, municipal inspections, and public filings. The moment my name hits the city registry, the deception will shatter. Derek will realize he has been played, and his panic will reach a fever pitch. He will not be the only one to react. Vivian built her social standing on the illusion of a perfect, subservient family. When she discovers that I am opening a rival empire on the most prestigious corner of the waterfront, her pristine facade will crack. She will not fight me with business strategies. She will fight me with venom, aiming directly at my personal reputation, before I can even unlock the front doors. The municipal registry in Newport updates its commercial lease filings every Tuesday at precisely 9 in the morning. The digital system is archaic, but it is the lifeblood of local real estate gossip. I sit at my kitchen island, sipping black tea, watching the clock tick toward the hour. I know my brother has an alert set for any commercial movement in the historic district. Derek spends his mornings scrolling through property databases, terrified of unseen competitors. He thinks he is guarding his territory. He is about to discover he has lost the war. At 5 minutes past 9, my name officially appears on the public ledger. The filing links me directly to the Harper Boathouse, the most coveted corner on the entire waterfront. The decoy at the strip mall dissolves. The truth is now a matter of public record. I can only imagine the color draining from my brother's face as he reads the screen in his pristine office. The realization that the local supply chain did not vanish into thin air, but merely shifted its allegiance to the largest property in the harbor must hit him like a physical blow. He cannot handle this level of strategic defeat. He will not try to solve the problem himself. He will pick up his phone and call our mother. Vivian considers herself the social architect of the young family. For years, she carefully constructed an image of flawless coastal wealth. She treats her reputation like a fragile glass sculpture, polishing it daily at the Newport Country Club. When Derek delivers the news about the boathouse, Vivian realizes the grave danger they face. If I open a rival market and succeed, the wealthy elite will ask questions. The true narrative of their theft and betrayal will surface. Vivian cannot allow her social circle to know she stole her daughter's life work to subsidize her son's fragile ego. She needs a preemptive strike. She needs to control the story before I even unlock the front doors. Her weapon of choice is character assassination. The Newport Country Club is a bastion of old money-manicured grass and guarded whispers. It smells of expensive sunscreen chlorine and gin. Later that same afternoon, Vivian sits on the veranda overlooking the tennis courts, surrounded by her closest confidants. These are women who wield immense influence over local banking boards and commercial real estate committees. Vivian orders a sparkling water with a twist of lemon, wearing a pair of oversized designer sunglasses to hide her eyes. She sighs deeply, playing the role of a burdened, heartbroken matriarch. She leans across the white linen tablecloth, lowering her voice to a theatrical whisper. She tells her friends that the family is navigating a profound, private tragedy. She claims the stress of running the store for 15 years finally broke me. According to her carefully woven lie, I suffered a severe psychological breakdown. I became erratic, hostile, and unable to manage basic inventory. The transfer of the business was not a hostile takeover. It was a desperate, loving intervention. Derek stepped in to rescue the failing family brand because I was no longer connected to reality. Vivian shakes her head, shedding a single, calculated tear. She tells the table that my attempt to lease the Harper Boathouse is a manic episode. She warns them that any landlord or investor who associates with me is taking a terrible risk. She paints me as an unhinged liability, a woman spiraling out of control. Her goal is clear: poison the well. Ensure the local commercial network views me with pity and fear, effectively suffocating my new enterprise before it can draw a single breath. The rumors spread rapidly through the country club. The affluent patrons murmur about the tragedy of the Jung family. They praise Vivian for her resilience and Derek for his noble sacrifice. In their insulated world of manicured lawns and catered luncheons, the story makes perfect sense. But Rhode Island is a state divided by a very rigid cultural line. There is the world of the country club, and there is the world of the waterfront. These two spheres rarely intersect except in the quiet moments of service. A club member will mention the gossip to a bartender. A valet driver will overhear a conversation in the back of a luxury sedan. The rumors drift down from the gilded hills and seep into the salt-stained streets of the harbor. By Thursday morning, the lie reaches the docks. Captain Rousseau hears it from a harbor master who overheard a yacht owner discussing my supposed mental collapse. Irene hears it from a delivery driver who caters to the elite neighborhoods. The narrative Vivian crafted reaches the very people who actually know me. This is where my mother makes her fatal miscalculation. Vivian views the working-class harbor community as background noise. She thinks they will blindly accept the narrative handed down by the wealthy elite. But the waterfront operates on a different frequency. These men and women do not judge a person by the rumors whispered over crystal wine glasses. They judge a person by their actions in the freezing rain, by the calluses on their hands, and by the promises they keep. Rousseau has watched me haul crates of ice at 4 a.m. for 15 years. Irene knows I spent my own holidays helping her label jars when her staff fell ill. Mateo remembers the winter I stayed awake for 3 days straight to pump floodwater out of the receiving bay, saving the entire inventory while my parents attended a charity gala. They know my mind is as sharp as a newly honed fillet knife. They know I am the sane, steady anchor of the Young family. When the harbor workers hear that Vivian is labeling her own daughter insane to protect her incompetent son, the reaction is not fear or pity. It is unadulterated disgust. The lie does not isolate me. It acts as a powerful accelerant. The waterfront community possesses a fierce tribal loyalty. When an outsider attacks one of their own, they close ranks. The rumors solidifies their hatred for Derek and Vivian. They see the character assassination for exactly what it is: a cruel, desperate tactic deployed by cowards. I experienced the shift in the atmosphere later that afternoon. I walked down Thames Street to meet with a contractor regarding the plumbing at the boathouse. I brace myself, wondering if the toxic gossip has tainted my reputation. Instead, a remarkable thing happens. As I pass the bustling shipyards, a group of dockhands stops their work. They do not look away or whisper behind my back. One of them, a broad-shouldered man covered in grease, gives me a solemn, respectful nod. A few blocks later, the owner of the local hardware store steps out of his shop and hands me a fresh cup of coffee, telling me my money is no longer good at his register. He tells me the whole harbor has my back. I realize I have not become a pariah. I have become a martyr. The community rallies around me with a quiet, fierce intensity. They share the true story among themselves, ensuring every mechanic, fisherman, and shop owner understands the depths of my parents' betrayal. Vivian's name becomes a curse word on the docks. Her pristine reputation is permanently shattered in the eyes of the very people who build, repair, and sustain the coastal town she claims to love. She tried to destroy my credibility, but she only managed to destroy her own. I sit on a weathered bench near the water, watching the ferry navigate the choppy waves. The character assassination failed. The social warfare did not break my stride. I hold the brass key to the boathouse in my pocket, feeling the overwhelming support of the local network pushing me forward. But the calm is temporary. The failure of the smear campaign will reach Derek by nightfall. He will realize that rumors cannot stop a signed lease. He cannot win a popularity contest, and he cannot outwork me on the docks. Driven by the suffocating fear of direct competition, he will abandon social tactics and resort to the only weapon he has left: financial leverage. He will look at the Harper Boathouse, recognize it as the instrument of his destruction, and decide that if he cannot beat me, he must buy the battlefield out from under my feet. The real war for the waterfront is about to begin, and it will require him to make a gamble that risks the entire family fortune. The truth always surfaces in a small coastal town. By Friday morning, the deception surrounding my supposed strip mall venture dissolves, replaced by the stark reality of the municipal lease registry. Derek discovers my true target is the Harper Boathouse. The realization must strike him with the force of a physical blow. The boathouse is not just a larger building. It sits on the most prestigious corner of the historic waterfront, positioned directly in the sightline of every affluent tourist entering the harbor. If I open a rival market on that specific intersection, backed by the very suppliers he insulted, his failing business will not just suffer, it will evaporate. Panic is a highly predictable emotion. It strips away rational thought and leaves only desperate instinct. Derek cannot compete with me on inventory, and he certainly cannot outwork me on the docks. Driven by the suffocating fear of direct competition, he resorts to the only tactic he understands. He attempts to bury me under a mountain of capital. He decides that, if he cannot beat my business model, he must buy the battlefield out from under my feet, keeping the boathouse vacant just to ensure I have nowhere to trade. To execute a hostile real estate block, Derek requires significant funding. He marches into the polished lobbies of traditional Newport banks, presenting his spreadsheets and his newly minted executive title. The loan officers listen politely, but bankers do not lend money based on ego. They look at his crashing daily revenue. They see the empty shelves and the sudden departure of his premium local vendors. Within hours, every reputable lending institution in Rhode Island denies his application. A rational businessman would take those rejections as a warning. Derek takes them as an insult. He turns his back on conventional finance and ventures into the shadowy, lucrative world of coastal hard money lending. He secures a meeting with a private bridge lender in Providence. These are men who operate out of sterile glass offices, preying on desperate developers who need fast, unregulated cash. They do not care about long-term business viability. They only care about collateral. The lender offers Derek a staggering sum of money, enough to easily outbid my lease offer. But the terms are engineered for destruction. It is a high-interest, short-term bridge loan. The contract stipulates a crushing balloon payment due in full by the end of October. October is the cruelest month on the New England coast. The tourists vanish, the temperature plummets, and retail revenue slows to a frozen crawl. To agree to a balloon payment in the dead of the off-season is financial suicide. But Derek is blinded by his need to defeat me. He accepts the terms. The lender requires an ironclad guarantee. The failing store on the harbor is not enough to cover the risk. Derek needs a pristine, unencumbered asset to secure the millions he intends to borrow. He drives to the sprawling Ocean Drive estate and presents the paperwork to our parents. He spins a masterful fiction, telling Albert and Vivian that he is making a brilliant strategic acquisition to expand their empire. He claims the loan is a mere formality, a temporary stepping stone to ultimate market dominance. He does not tell them about the predatory interest rates or the fatal October deadline. He just points to the signature lines. Albert and Vivian, blinded by their unwavering worship of their son, do not hire an independent attorney to review the documents. They do not ask to see the true revenue reports from the store. Vivian unscrews her expensive fountain pen, and Albert adjusts his reading glasses. With a few quick strokes of ink, they co-sign the hard money loan. They pledge their stunning multi-million-dollar estate as the primary collateral. They willingly strap their entire retirement, their social standing, and their home to the hull of a sinking ship. Armed with his toxic cash, Derek contacts Silas Thorne. Silas owns the Harbor Boathouse. He is a formidable figure on the waterfront, a man carved from old money and generational salt spray. He wears weathered flannel, drives a beat-up truck, and possesses a net worth that rivals the banking executives in Providence. He hates corporate chains and despises developers who try to turn the working harbor into a sterile amusement park. Derek submits a formal offer to Silas, proposing a rental rate 40% above the asking price. It is an astronomical sum designed to blind the landlord with sheer profit. Derek plans to sign the lease and leave the massive historic building entirely dark, treating it as an expensive storage closet, just to lock me out of the market. On Monday afternoon, my phone rings. Silas Thorne summons me to his office. His workspace sits on the top floor of a weathered harbor building, smelling of seasoned teakwood and old nautical charts. A brass telescope rests near a large window overlooking the gray, churning waters of the bay. Silas sits behind a heavy mahogany desk, his weathered hands steepled beneath his chin. He does not offer small talk. He slides a thick folder across the desk. "Your brother sent me a very interesting proposal," Silas says, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "He is offering a premium that would make any sane landlord sign the paperwork today. He wants the boathouse, Charlene, and he is willing to overpay to get it. I do not flinch. I do not beg. Pleading is a currency that holds no value in this room." I look at the folder, then look directly into Silas' sharp, evaluating eyes. "He does not want your building, Silas," I state, keeping my tone clinical and detached. "He wants to starve me out. If you hand him the keys, that beautiful historic property will sit empty. He will board up the windows and let the salt rot the cedar decks. He is trying to build a moat to protect his failing store." Silas leans back in his heavy leather chair. The wood creaks under his weight. "And what are you offering me, Charlene? You cannot match his dollar amount." I reach into my leather tote bag and extract 3 crisp envelopes. I place them side by side on the mahogany desk, aligning the edges with meticulous care. "I cannot match his toxic debt," I correct him. Derek secured a predatory hard money loan to fund that offer. He leveraged our parents' home to get the cash. He has a balloon payment due in October, right when the harbor goes quiet. He will default, Silas. If you sign with him, you will be tangled in commercial foreclosure proceedings before the first snow falls. I tap the 3 envelopes resting on the desk. "I am bringing you the actual harbor," I say. "These are signed letters of intent from Captain Russo, Irene, and Matteo. Every premium supplier who built the reputation of Jung Coastal Provisions has pledged exclusive distribution to my new entity. I have the fleet, I have the artisans, and I have the trust of the year-round residents. If you give me the lease, I will open a market that honors the legacy of this waterfront. I will pay your asking rent on time, every month, without fail, using clean revenue generated by honest work." Silas stares at the letters of intent. He understands the profound weight of those names. Rousseau does not sign his name for just anyone. Irene does not pledge her livelihood on a whim. These documents represent the undeniable heartbeat of the Newport coast. For a long, silent moment, the only sound in the office is the whistling of the wind against the thick glass window panes. Silas reaches forward. He bypasses the letters of intent, picking up my brother's lucrative 40% premium offer. He holds the thick stack of paper in his calloused hands. A man who buys a building just to keep it dark does not respect the wood, Silas murmurs. With a swift, fluid motion, Silas drops Derek's proposal directly into the heavy-duty paper shredder resting beside his desk. The machine whirs to life, grinding the predatory financial flecks into tiny, worthless strips of confetti. Silas pulls a fresh contract from his desk drawer. He uncaps a pen and slides the document across the mahogany surface toward me. "The Harper Boathouse is yours, Charlene," he says, a grim, satisfied smile touching the corners of his mouth. "Make them bleed." I sign my name on the dotted line, securing the ultimate weapon in this war. I fold the lease, place it in my bag, and shake Silas's hand. I walk out of the office, feeling the solid, undeniable shift of power aligning in my favor. Derek Hostelblock has failed. He now sits in his rotting store, having lost the most important real estate battle on the coast. But the true danger is just beginning. He is still holding millions of dollars in toxic, high-interest cash, and he possesses a fatal inability to admit defeat. With the boathouse gone, his fragile ego will demand an immediate public victory. He will look at his decaying, imported inventory and decide that the only way to save his sinking ship is to burn through that predatory loan, funneling the money into a disastrous physical transformation that will seal his ultimate doom. The Harbor Grapevine operates with a ruthless and terrifying efficiency. By Tuesday evening, every contractor, mechanic, and deckhand from Thames Street to the commercial shipyards knows my brother lost the boathouse lease. The news ripples through the coastal community, carrying a distinct undercurrent of amusement. Derek tried to wield a checkbook like a weapon and ended up striking empty air. Defeat is a strange catalyst. For a seasoned business owner, losing a prime piece of real estate triggers a period of reflection and strategic recalculation. For a man drowning in unearned arrogance, defeat triggers a frantic and destructive tailspin. Derek is now holding a staggering amount of high-interest cash from his predatory bridge loan. The money burns a hole in his pristine ledger. He cannot secure a new location, and he refuses to admit that his current inventory is driving customers away. His fragile ego demands a visible victory to present to our parents. He decides that if he cannot buy a better building, he will force his current store into the future, regardless of the cost. He launches a disastrous aesthetic remodel. He does not hire local carpenters who understand the structural nuances of historic coastal architecture. Instead, he imports a commercial contracting firm from out of state. I sit in my parked truck across the street on a Thursday morning, watching the destruction of my childhood inheritance unfold. Workers drag the original reclaimed oak display counters out the front door, tossing the hand-carved wood into a rusted dumpster. Those counters survived 3 hurricanes and decades of salt spray. Derek replaces them with sleek, glossy white laminate fixtures that look like they belong in a sterile shopping mall pharmacy. Then comes the signage. Newport is a historic district built on cobblestone streets, gas lamps, and muted nautical colors. The zoning board is notoriously strict about preserving the heritage of the waterfront. Derek ignores the municipal guidelines entirely. He pays an exorbitant premium to bypass the waiting period, having a contractor install glowing pink and electric blue neon signs in the front windows. The harsh, artificial light clashes terribly with the brick exterior, projecting a cheap neon glare onto the quiet sidewalk. He transforms a revered maritime institution into a tacky seaside carnival attraction. His obsession with modernization extends to the customer experience. He rips out the traditional cash registers, laying off 2 of my veteran employees in the process. In their place, he installs a row of digital touchscreen ordering kiosks. He intends to streamline the checkout process, forcing tourists to scroll through digital menus and swipe their credit cards without ever speaking to a human being. He severely underestimates the corrosive power of the Rhode Island coast. The air blowing off the Narragansett Bay is dense with microscopic salt crystals and heavy moisture. Within 48 hours, the expensive digital kiosks begin to fail. Sarah, who miraculously survived the staffing cuts, sends me covert updates from behind the newly installed laminate counter. She describes how the thick coastal humidity seeps into the ventilation grates of the touchscreens. The screens cloud over with internal condensation. The touch sensors glitch continuously. Tourists stand in line, jabbing their fingers against frozen glass monitors, growing increasingly frustrated as the machines refuse to process their orders. Derek spends his afternoons rushing between the broken terminals, frantically wiping the screens with a microfiber cloth, offering hollow apologies to a dwindling crowd of annoyed customers. The technological failures are humiliating, but the logistical breakdown is catastrophic. To offset the cost of his expensive remodel, Derek doubles down on his cheap inventory strategy. He orders a shipping container full of discounted imported seafood, assuming volume will cure his shrinking profit margins. He understands numbers on a spreadsheet, but he knows nothing about the delicate cold chain required to transport perishables. The container arrives on a sweltering Tuesday in mid-June. The Rhode Island sun is baking the asphalt, pushing the temperature toward 90 degrees. The out-of-state freight driver misses his delivery window and ends up parked in a holding lot for 4 hours with a malfunctioning refrigeration unit. When the truck finally backs up to the loading dock, the damage is already done. Sarah sends me a voice memo, her tone laced with genuine nausea. She describes the smell leaking from the cardboard boxes as Derek forces the staff to unload the freight. The farm-raised tilapia and imported crabs sat in the suffocating heat for too long. They are not entirely spoiled, but they carry the faint, undeniable odor of ammonia and decay. Derek refuses to take the financial loss. He orders Sarah to pack the questionable seafood into the new display freezers, hoping the freezing temperatures will mask the smell. It is a desperate, repulsive gamble. Customers walk past the seafood counter, wrinkle their noses, and promptly walk out the front door. The expensive neon signs outside promise a modern premium market, but the air inside smells like a rotting tide pool. Despite the physical decay of the store, the illusion of success persists at the Ocean Drive estate. I hear about my parents from Irene, who still caters small events for the affluent neighborhoods. She tells me that Vivian was holding court at the country club luncheon on Wednesday. Vivian sat on the veranda, boasting loudly about her son. She praised his visionary upgrades, telling everyone that the new digital kiosks and neon branding were revolutionizing the local retail scene. Albert and Vivian are blinding themselves to the reality of the situation. Derek visits the estate every Sunday, presenting them with beautifully formatted digital spreadsheets. He shows them projected revenue models based on the upcoming tourist rush. He highlights the temporary spike in foot traffic generated by the flashing signs, conveniently omitting the fact that those customers leave without making a purchase. Our parents look at the pristine graphs and the confident posture of their son, willingly choosing his manufactured data over the undeniable truth resting on the harbor. They are convinced the upcoming summer revenue will easily cover the staggering debt they co-signed. I sit at my kitchen island, bathed in the soft glow of my laptop screen. I open a blank spreadsheet of my own. I do not deal in projections or fantasies. I deal in cold, hard mathematics. I use public municipal filings to estimate the cost of the unauthorized neon signs and the resulting zoning fines he is accumulating. I factor in the exorbitant price of the out-of-state contractors and the faulty touchscreen technology. I add the sunk cost of the rotting imported seafood. I calculate the predatory interest rate attached to his bridge loan, knowing the exact date the fatal balloon payment will strike. I map his daily burn rate with clinical precision. The numbers stare back at me, rendering a fatal verdict. Derek is bleeding capital at an unsustainable pace. He has transformed a profitable historic landmark into a hollow money pit. The debt is compounding daily, wrapping itself like a heavy iron chain around the foundation of my parents' estate. A faint, familiar pang of sorrow surfaces in my chest. These are the people who raised me. I spent my childhood seeking their approval, working tirelessly to earn a fraction of the pride they freely showered upon my brother. I know the financial ruin approaching them will be devastating. It will strip away their home, their social standing, and their dignity. I take a slow, deep breath and deliberately extinguish that sorrow. I remind myself of the $1 severance agreement they slid across the scratched oak counter. I remember the vicious smear campaign Vivian launched to poison my reputation among the local landlords. They did not stumble into this trap by accident. They walked into it with their eyes wide open, fueled by greed and an unyielding desire to elevate their son at my expense. They handed him the match and the gasoline, and now they are standing inside the burning building. I cannot pull them from the flames without catching fire myself. I close the spreadsheet, locking away my lingering familial pity. They strapped themselves to a sinking ship just to stroke his ego. It is not my responsibility to provide the life raft. The calendar turns to late June. The dense, humid air of the New England summer settles over the coast. The final battleground is rapidly approaching. The 4th of July weekend is the undisputed apex of the Rhode Island tourist economy. It is the single most lucrative window of the year, a defining moment that can either save a struggling business or expose its fatal flaws to thousands of visitors. I hold the keys to the Harper Boathouse, and my inventory is perfectly aligned. I am preparing to open my doors and deliver a public execution of my brother business acumen, setting the stage for a holiday clash that will leave the entire harbor stunned. The first week of July arrives carrying the distinct electric energy that defines the peak of the New England summer. The 4th of July weekend is the crucible of coastal commerce. It is the 3-day window where businesses either secure their winter reserves or expose their fatal operational cracks. The sky is a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the harbor is choked with private yachts, sailboats, and eager vacationers. I stand on the sweeping cedar deck of the harbor boathouse at 5:30 in the morning. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of salt and impending success. I do not have flashy neon signs or a massive social media budget. I have the power of a unified community. I named the new market the Outpost at Harper Harbor. The lettering above the door is hand-carved by a local craftsman, honoring the maritime heritage of the waterfront. Word of mouth is a far more lethal weapon than any digital algorithm. At exactly 6 o'clock, the deep, throaty rumble of a commercial diesel engine echoes across the bay. Captain Rousseau fishing trawler, its hull, weathered and proud, cuts through the morning fog and pulls directly up to my deep water dock. The sheer spectacle of a working boat docking at a retail market draws an immediate crowd. Early rising tourists and dedicated locals gather along the wooden railings, watching in awe as Rousseau crew tosses thick hawser lines to my dockhands. Rousseau steps onto the cedar planks, a broad, triumphant grin spreading across his scarred face. He oversees the unloading of massive plastic bins overflowing with dayboat scallops, shimmering striped bass, and lobsters harvested just hours ago. The crowd cheers, captivated by the raw, authentic connection to the ocean. This is what my brother failed to understand. You cannot manufacture culture with a touchscreen. Inside the outpost, the atmosphere is intoxicating. I restored the original vaulted timber ceilings and installed massive glass windows that frame the harbor like a living painting. Irene stands behind a sprawling rustic counter, arranging hundreds of jars of her artisanal beach plum preserves. The air is thick with the sweet aroma of her baking. Matteo has an entire dedicated corner where he displays his hand-stitched canvas and leather gear. The rich smell of raw hide mingling with the scent of fresh seafood. By 8 o'clock, the line to enter the outpost stretches down the cobblestone sidewalk. The wealthy, year-round residents mingle with the tourists, creating an atmosphere of vibrant exclusivity. They buy premium goods at premium prices because they know the money supports the true architects of the harbor. A mile down the waterfront, a very different scene unfolds. I receive continuous updates from Sarah, who is enduring her final weekend under my brother command before she transitions to a managerial role at the outpost. The situation at Young Coastal Provisions is a masterclass in hubris. Derek stands behind the malfunctioning digital kiosks, wearing a linen suit that is entirely inappropriate for retail labor. His expensive pink and blue neon signs flash in the bright sunlight, looking desperate and cheap. The store is virtually empty. The few tourists who wander inside are met with the lingering odor of spoiled imported seafood and shelves lined with generic plastic trinkets. The local community executes a coordinated and ruthless boycott. But they do not just stay away. They actively divert the wealth. When a family of affluent tourists stops to ask for directions to a premium seafood market, the harbor masters, parking attendants, and wait staff do not point them toward Jung. They steer them directly to the outpost. The locals act as a living firewall, protecting my new venture and starving my brother operation of vital foot traffic. The contrast is breathtaking. The outpost is a symphony of commerce, operating with flawless precision. My team moves with practiced efficiency, processing transactions with a smile and a deep knowledge of the products they sell. We are not just selling goods, we are selling the genuine, unadulterated soul of the Rhode Island coast. Derek, meanwhile, spends his Saturday afternoon arguing with a software technician over the phone. The condensation has completely fried the motherboard of his primary checkout terminal. He is forced to write down credit card numbers on a yellow legal pad, a chaotic and insecure process that drives even more customers out the door. His mass-produced inventory sits undisturbed on the white laminate shelves, gathering dust, while the interest on his predatory loan compounds by the minute. As the sun sets on Sunday evening, the sky above the harbor explodes with the brilliant colors of the municipal fireworks display. I stand on the deck of the outpost, surrounded by Russo, Irene, Matteo, and my dedicated staff. We raise glasses of sparkling cider, watching the vibrant reflections dance across the dark water. I step into my office to run the final financial reports for the holiday weekend. I open the ledger and stare at the numbers. The outpost did not just meet its projections, it shattered them. In a single 3-day window, my new market generated more clean revenue than Jung Coastal Provisions had ever achieved in any equivalent period during my entire 15-year tenure. The volume of premium sales is staggering, and the profit margins are robust because the community provided their goods at fair, equitable rates based on mutual respect. I close the ledger, a profound sense of vindication washing over me. The harbor grapevine delivers the final crushing blow regarding Derek's weekend performance. Sarah sends a text message just before she clocks out. He is sitting on the floor of the back office, she writes. He did not make enough to cover the payroll this week. The execution of his business acumen is complete and public. Derek assumed that a brand could survive on ego and a corporate spreadsheet. He fundamentally failed to respect the delicate ecosystem of the waterfront.
His cheap imported goods rotted, his flashy technology failed in the salt air, and his arrogant negotiations alienated the only people who could have saved him. He is now holding a massive, historic property that generates zero revenue, backed by a toxic bridge loan with a fatal balloon payment rapidly approaching. He cannot borrow more money, and he cannot sell his tainted inventory. The panic that previously drove his frantic remodeling will now curdle into sheer terror. He will look at the pristine graphs he presented to Albert and Vivian and realize that the numbers were a manufactured lie. The illusion of success is over. The harsh reality of his profound incompetence is undeniable. He will need a scapegoat or a miracle to survive the impending financial collapse. But the true danger of a cornered narcissist is that they rarely accept the blame for their own destruction. Driven by the fear of losing his parents' adoration and the impending threat of foreclosure, Derek will not surrender gracefully. He will attempt to drag the very person he betrayed back into the fire to save himself. He will cross a boundary so fundamental that it will sever the final, microscopic thread of my familial pity, setting the stage for a midnight confrontation that will forever alter the dynamic of the young family. 2 weeks pass. The relentless rhythm of the coastal summer strips away any lingering illusions on the waterfront. The outpost operates with a flawless, synchronized hum. We process hundreds of transactions a day, moving premium ocean freight with precision. I spend my days coordinating with the fishing fleet and my evenings balancing a highly profitable ledger. It is Thursday night. The clock on the brick wall of my office reads midnight. The harbor is wrapped in a thick blanket of sea fog, muting the sounds of the halyards clinking against the sailboat masts. Inside the market, the air smells of freshly scrubbed cedar mild bleach and the faint lingering sweetness of baked preserves. I stand alone behind the solid oak checkout counter, running the final batch of daily receipts through the digital accounting software. A sharp tap echoes through the empty building. The sound comes from the heavy glass entrance facing the street. I pause my typing and look up. The exterior street lamps cast a hazy yellow glow through the dense fog. A solitary figure stands on the damp cobblestone sidewalk, one hand pressed flat against the glass pane. I recognize the silhouette immediately. It is Albert. I walk across the dark retail floor, my boots echoing against the vaulted timber ceiling. I disengage the brass deadbolt and pull the heavy door inward. The ocean chill sweeps into the warm room. My father stands on the threshold. The visual transformation is jarring. For my entire life, Albert projected an aura of unshakable wealth and crisp authority. He wore custom-tailored suits like armor. Tonight, that armor is fractured. His silver hair is unkempt, flattened by the coastal moisture. The collar of his expensive dress shirt is unbuttoned, his silk tie loosened and hanging askew. The skin around his eyes is bruised with profound exhaustion, carrying a distinct grayish pallor. He looks like a man who has aged 10 years in the span of 14 days. He does not carry a briefcase. He does not project dominance. He stands in the doorway, shivering slightly in the damp wind. "Charlene," he says. His tone is hollow, stripped of its usual commanding cadence. It is a fragile, raspy sound. "I need to speak with you." I do not invite him into my office. I step back, allowing him to enter the main retail floor, keeping the physical boundary of the checkout counter between us. I close the glass door, sealing out the harbor fog. The silence inside the market is heavy and expectant. Albert takes a few slow steps into the room. He looks around the sprawling space. He takes in the towering display racks filled with artisanal goods, the pristine commercial freezers humming quietly in the background, and the expansive vaulted architecture that speaks of undeniable prosperity. He sees the tangible, irrefutable proof of my success. The reality of what he threw away stares back at him from every polished surface. His shoulders slump.
The last remaining fragment of his pride dissolves into the ambient glow of the security lights. He walks toward the oak counter and places his trembling hands flat on the polished wood. He cannot bring himself to look me directly in the eyes. His gaze remains fixed on the grain of the timber. "The store is failing," Albert whispers, his voice cracking on the final syllable. "We are losing capital faster than we can calculate. The imported inventory rotted in the heat. The digital terminals short-circuited. The tourists walk past our windows and come here. Derek tried to fix it, but he does not know how to salvage the supply chain. He does not know these people." I cross my arms over my chest. My pulse remains perfectly even. I watch him confess his ruin with clinical detachment. "The situation is much worse than poor retail performance," Albert continues. Finally lifting his exhausted eyes to meet mine, the panic bleeding through his expression is raw and unvarnished. "Derek took out a bridge loan to fund the remodel. He used a private coastal lender. We needed collateral to secure the cash. Your mother and I co-signed the agreement. We pledged the Ocean Drive estate against the debt." The gravity of his confession settles over the quiet room. They did not just hand my brother a business. They handed him the keys to their entire financial existence. "The terms are predatory," Albert says, a bead of cold sweat forming on his forehead despite the chill in the room. "The interest is compounding daily. We have a balloon payment due at the end of October. If we cannot deliver the principal balance in full by that date, the lender will foreclose. They will take the commercial building and they will take our home. We will be left with nothing. Your mother is terrified to leave the house. Derek is paralyzed." He grips the edge of the oak counter, his knuckles turning stark white. He leans forward, his posture radiating sheer desperation. "We need you, Charlene," he pleads, the tears welling in the corners of his bruised eyes. "You have the revenue. You have the suppliers. You hold the market share. I am asking you to merge your limited liability company with Jung Coastal Provisions. Consolidate the brands, use your profit margins to service the debt, and stabilize the loan. We can restructure the executive board. We can make you an equal partner alongside your brother. We can save the family legacy together." I stand perfectly still in the dim light of the market. I process the staggering audacity of his request. He is asking me to take the pristine, thriving empire I built from scratch and chain it to a sinking ship. He wants me to funnel my clean, hard-earned revenue into a toxic loan to save the very people who engineered my eviction. A profound sense of clarity washes over me. The final lingering ghost of daughterly obligation evaporates into the cold air. I uncross my arms and place my palms flat on the counter, mirroring his stance but projecting an unyielding barrier of stone. "You are not offering me a partnership, Albert," I state, my voice dropping to a low, frigid register. "You are asking me to pay a ransom for the mistakes you willfully subsidized." Albert opens his mouth to protest, but I raise a single hand, silencing him instantly. "Let us review the timeline of this family legacy," I say, articulating every word with surgical precision. 6 weeks ago, you walked into my store with a legal document designed to strip away 15 years of my sweat equity. You demanded I sign away my right to fair compensation in exchange for a single $1 bill. You did not care about my financial future. You did not care how I would pay my rent or feed myself. You looked at me, your own blood, and decided I was an acceptable casualty for Derek ego. "Charlene, please," Albert begs, his voice trembling. "That was a misunderstanding. We were trying to protect the corporate structure." I ignore his hollow excuse and press forward, driving the truth into the space between us. "When I secured the lease for this building," I continue my gaze, locking onto his panicked eyes, "Vivian did not call to congratulate me. She sat on the veranda of her country club and orchestrated a vicious smear campaign.
She told the most influential landlords and bankers in this state that I had suffered a mental breakdown. She called me an unhinged liability. She tried to poison the harbor against me, hoping I would fail before I even opened these doors. I take a slow, deliberate breath, letting the weight of their sins crush the last breath of his argument. You did not come here tonight as a father, I say, delivering the ultimate cold truth. You came here as a drowning man looking for a lifeline. You do not miss your daughter. You miss my utility. You miss the safety net I provided while you played pretend on Ocean Drive. Albert stares at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from the bay. The tears spill over his lower eyelids, tracking through the deep wrinkles on his cheeks. He recognizes the fatal finality in my tone. He sees the impenetrable wall I have built between us. I will not set myself on fire to keep my brother warm. I tell him, my voice devoid of any anger, echoing only with profound finality. I will not drain my accounts to pay a predatory lender for a disaster I did not create. Your son signed the contract. You pledged the collateral. The debt belongs to you. I step back from the oak counter and point a steady finger toward the front exit. Leave my property, I command. Albert lingers for one agonizing second. He searches my face for any flicker of hesitation, any trace of the obedient child he once manipulated with ease. He finds nothing but the cold, unforgiving reflection of his own ruin. His shoulders collapse entirely. The illusion of the young family patriarch shatters into countless irreparable pieces on the cedar floorboards. He turns around slowly, his tailored suit hanging loosely on his diminished frame. He shuffles toward the heavy glass door, his designer shoes scuffing against the wood. He pushes the door open and steps out into the swirling coastal fog. The brass deadbolt clicks into place behind him, sealing the tomb on his desperate plea. I stand alone in the quiet market, listening to the distant drone of a foghorn out on the bay. The emotional climax of this war is over. I have severed the final chain. But the tactical conclusion is still looming on the horizon. October is coming. The harsh, unforgiving chill of the New England autumn will soon sweep across the harbor, bringing the maturity date of the hard money loan. The balloon payment is unavoidable. My brother has no capital, no inventory, and no remaining options. The inevitable collapse is no longer a possibility, it is a rapidly approaching certainty, and I will be waiting in the front row to watch the final structure fall. October does not arrive gently on the Rhode Island coast. It sweeps into the harbor with a biting nor'easter, stripping the final autumn leaves from the oak trees and turning the Narragansett Bay into a churning expanse of slate-gray water. The summer crowds vanish overnight, the luxury yachts retreat to dry storage, the local economy shifts from a lucrative sprint into a grueling marathon of winter survival. At the outpost, we embrace the seasonal transition. We stock heavy wool blankets, dense chowders, and insulated marine gear for the commercial fleets braving the freezing Atlantic currents. We adapt because we understand the harsh, unyielding rhythm of the waterfront. A mile down the cobblestone street, my former family business sits exposed to the elements, entirely unequipped for the reality of a coastal freeze. The electric pink neon signs in the front windows flicker erratically, their fragile wiring corroded by months of relentless salt spray and dropping temperatures. Inside, the climate control systems struggle against the drafty historic brick walls. The shelves remain burdened with stagnant summer inventory. Plastic beach toys and thin imported souvenirs collect dust under the harsh fluorescent lighting. The discounted seafood my brother stockpiled has long since passed its freezing tolerance. The product takes on a pale, freezer-burned pallor, emitting a faint, acrid odor that permeates the glossy white laminate floorboards. Derek is out of time. The calendar marches relentlessly toward the final Friday of the month. That specific date, carries a fatal financial designation. It is the maturity date of the predatory bridge loan. The contract he signed, in a frenzy of arrogance, does not allow for partial payments or graceful extensions. The coastal hard money lender demands the principal balance in full, plus the compounded interest transferred via wire before the close of business. The sum is staggering. It is a seven-figure weight hanging directly over the foundation of the Young family estate. My brother sits in the drafty back office, staring at a computer screen that offers no salvation. The business bank accounts are drained. The daily revenue cannot even cover the cost of the electricity required to keep the lights on. He cannot secure another loan because his credit profile is permanently chained to a failing retail disaster. For 32 years, Derek navigated life by passing the consequences of his actions onto someone else. Whenever he faced a hurdle, Albert wrote a check, or Vivian smoothed over the conflict with her social connections, or I absorbed the grueling manual labor. Now standing on the edge of total financial ruin, there is no one left to shield him from the impact. A man possessing genuine character would stand his ground, call his parents, and formulate a strategy to mitigate the damage. He would lock the doors, liquidate the remaining assets, and face the lenders with whatever dignity he had left. Derek chooses the path of cowardice. He logs onto his laptop and accepts a mid-level consulting position at a corporate firm in a landlocked Midwestern state, a job arranged through an old fraternity contact. He drafts a brief, cowardly email to Albert and Vivian, claiming the coastal retail market is too volatile for his visionary talents, and blaming the local community for refusing to embrace his modernization strategy. He packs his expensive tailored suits into a leather duffel bag. Under the cover of darkness, he climbs into his leased silver sports car and drives out of Newport. He abandons the store, the debt, and his family, fleeing across state lines before the sun even rises on the day of the default. Friday morning arrives with a cruel, biting frost. The wire transfer deadline passes at exactly 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The default is instantaneous. Unregulated coastal lenders do not waste time mailing polite warning letters or negotiating grace periods over the phone. They operate with ruthless mechanical efficiency. The breach of contract triggers an immediate cascade of legal mechanisms engineered to seize the pledged collateral. Across town at the Ocean Drive estate, the reality of their son departing crashes into Albert and Vivian. They read the email Derek sent from the highway. The illusion they maintained for decades shatters into irreversible pieces. The executive they worshipped has left them holding the bag for a multi-million-dollar disaster. The phone rings in their pristine kitchen. It is not their son calling to explain his exit. It is the legal department of the lending firm informing them that the bridge loan is officially in default. The representatives calmly explain that the foreclosure process has commenced. The lenders now claim the commercial building, and they hold the primary lien on the residential estate. By Monday morning, the legal strike force arrives at the waterfront. I am standing near the receiving bay of the outpost, reviewing a manifest with Captain Russo, when a fleet of black sport utility vehicles pulls up to the original Young Coastal Provisions building. Men wearing dark, unbranded jackets step onto the freezing sidewalk. They do not knock. They carry heavy steel bolt cutters and a stack of municipal court orders. The harbor workers pause their morning routines, watching the grim procession unfold in the morning mist. The men slice through the padlocks on the loading dock. They march to the front entrance and drill out the brass deadbolts, replacing them with heavy-duty commercial locks. A representative tapes a thick laminated foreclosure notice directly onto the front glass, obscuring the flickering neon sign. The bold black letters announce the seizure of the property by the lending institution. The visual is stark and final. It took me 15 years of grueling 80-hour work weeks, blistered hands, and unrelenting dedication to build that market into a coastal cornerstone. It took my brother exactly 6 months to burn it to the ground using nothing but unfiltered hubris and borrowed cash. I watched the men in the dark jackets finish their work and drive away, leaving the historic brick building shuttered and silent. The cold autumn wind sweeps down Thames Street, rattling the newly installed chains against the heavy wooden doors. A passerby might expect me to feel a surge of vindictive joy or a triumphant thrill at the sight of my enemies losing their stronghold. I search my chest for that spark of petty satisfaction, but I find nothing. There is no joy in watching a legacy turn to ash. There is only a profound, chilling emptiness. I feel the exact same sensation a person feels when they watch a boulder roll off the edge of a cliff and smash into the canyon floor below. You do not cheer for the rock. You simply acknowledge the cold, impartial mechanics of gravity doing its job. Albert and Vivian pushed their own business over the edge the moment they handed the keys to a man who refused to respect the weight of the work. They engineered their own demise. The outcome was mathematically certain from the very first day. I turn my back on the shuttered building and walk inside the outpost. The warmth of the bustling market embraces me. The registers hum with steady commerce. My staff moves with focused energy, serving the resilient local community that chose to stand by my side through the turmoil. The past is sealed behind heavy chains and laminated court orders, but the final chapter of this war has yet to be written. The lending firm has no interest in operating a retail store. They only care about liquidating the asset to recover their principal funds. The distressed property will soon hit the public auction block. My parents will be forced into a desperate corner, praying the building sells for enough to clear their staggering debt and save their residential estate. They will enter that auction house hoping for a miracle. They have no idea I will be sitting in the front row, preparing to deliver the ultimate poetic conclusion. The final week of November brings a bitter frost that hardens the Rhode Island soil and coats the harbor in a thin layer of morning ice. I park my truck outside a sterile concrete municipal building in downtown Providence. This is the county auction house. It is a place where commercial dreams are unraveled and sold to the highest bidder. The air inside the lobby smells of industrial floor wax, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. It is a stark contrast to the warm, bustling cedar floors of the outpost. I walk through the metal detectors and enter the main bidding hall. The room features rows of rigid wooden benches facing a raised mahogany podium. Investors and real estate speculators occupy the middle rows. These are men and women who deal in distressed assets, hunting for bargains among other people's ruined ambitions. They flip through thick, glossy catalogs, murmuring to one another in hushed tones. I take a seat in the very front row. My posture is relaxed. I fold my hands in my lap, holding a yellow numbered bidding paddle. 10 minutes before the proceedings begin, the heavy double doors at the back of the hall swing open. Albert and Vivian step inside. The physical toll of the last 2 months is etched deeply into their faces. My mother, a woman who once dictated social hierarchies at the Newport Country Club, looks frail. Her designer coat hangs loosely on her diminished frame. Her posture, usually rigid with manufactured pride, is bent. Albert walks beside her, his steps slow and heavy. The crisp executive aura he projected for 3 decades is entirely gone. He looks like a hollow shell of a man, carrying the invisible, crushing weight of a 7-figure debt. They do not notice me sitting in the front row. They shuffle toward a shadowy corner in the very back of the hall, sliding onto a wooden bench. Vivian clutches a crumpled tissue in her trembling hands. Albert stares blankly at the floor. I know exactly why they are here. I spent the previous evening reviewing the public foreclosure filings. The mechanics of a coastal bridge loan are unforgiving. When a borrower defaults, the lender seizes the primary commercial collateral. The property is then sold at public auction. If the final sale price covers the outstanding balance, the debt is cleared. However, if the building sells for less than the owed amount, the lender issues a deficiency judgment. That legal mechanism allows them to target the secondary collateral. In this specific case, the secondary collateral is the sprawling Ocean Drive estate. Albert and Vivian are sitting in the back row praying for a miracle. They are desperately hoping that two wealthy developers will enter a bidding war, driving the price high enough to satisfy the predatory lender. They need an astronomical sum just to break even and save their residential home. The auctioneer steps up to the mahogany podium. He is a brisk, efficient man who processes human ruin with the same detached cadence a grocer uses to ring up produce. He adjusts his microphone, clearing his throat, and begins reading the legal disclaimers. The hall quiets down. The speculators open their catalogs to the first featured lot. The auctioneer announces the address of Jung Coastal Provisions. A large digital screen above his head displays recent photographs of the exterior. The images reveal the boarded-up windows and the flickering, broken neon signs my brother installed. The contrast between the historic brick and the cheap, tacky renovations draws quiet scoffs from the seasoned investors sitting behind me. The auctioneer is legally obligated to disclose the current condition of the asset. He lists the structural defects into the microphone. He notes that the original, authentic interior was gutted and replaced with cheap laminate fixtures. He mentions the severe water damage caused by the failing digital kiosks, which short-circuited and compromised the electrical grid. He reads off a list of pending municipal code violations regarding the unapproved exterior signage. The asset is deeply tainted. Derek did not just bankrupt the business, he poisoned the real estate. The auctioneer sets a high opening bid attempting to recover the full principal amount for the lending firm. "Do I hear an opening offer?" he asks, scanning the rows of wooden benches. The silence in the room is profound. It is a heavy, suffocating quiet. The investors flip past the page in their catalogs, shaking their heads. Nobody wants to purchase a gutted building carrying thousands of dollars in municipal fines. The required renovations alone would drain any potential profit margin. The auctioneer lowers the starting figure by $200,000. "Do I have any interest at this adjusted price?" he prompts, holding his gavel in the air. Again, nobody moves. A man in a tailored suit 2 rows behind me checks his watch and yawns. The indifference is palpable. The commercial elite of Rhode Island are looking at my family legacy and deciding it is essentially worthless. I do not turn around, but I can hear the sharp, ragged sound of my mother weeping in the back corner. The muffled sobs echo faintly off the concrete walls. Albert is undoubtedly sitting beside her, paralyzed by the realization that their salvation is not coming. The miraculous bidding war they prayed for does not exist. The auctioneer sighs, clearly eager to move on to a more lucrative lot. He lowers the price one final time, dropping the figure to a fraction of the original demand. It is a rock-bottom number, representing the minimum the lender is willing to accept to offload the toxic property before writing it off as a total loss. If there are no takers at this threshold, the lot will be withdrawn and retained by the bank, the auctioneer warns, raising his gavel to eye level. Going once? My pulse maintains a steady rhythmic beat. I do not feel anxious. I feel the calm, surgical clarity of a player executing a flawless checkmate. Going twice, the auctioneer calls out, his voice echoing through the speakers. Albert and Vivian are seconds away from immediate total bankruptcy. If the lot closes without a sale, the deficiency judgment will encompass the entire original loan amount. The bank will seize the Ocean Drive estate before the weekend. I wait until the exact moment the wooden gavel begins its downward descent. I raise my yellow paddle high into the air. Bid registered in the front row, the auctioneer announces, stopping his downward swing. The sudden break in the silence causes a ripple of movement throughout the hall. The speculators lean forward, curious to see who is foolish enough to take on the cursed property. I do not turn around to look at the back bench. I know exactly what is happening in that shadowy corner. Albert and Vivian are likely gasping their hearts leaping with sudden, desperate hope. They see a paddle rise. They see a buyer stepping in at the final possible second. In their panicked state, they probably assume this anonymous investor just rescued them from the brink of destruction. "Are there any competing offers?" the auctioneer asks, sweeping his gaze across the room one last time. The hall remains perfectly still. Nobody else is willing to touch the building. My surgical lowball offer is the only lifeline extended. "Sold," the auctioneer barks, striking the heavy wooden gavel against the sounding block. The loud crack seals the transaction. The clerk gestures for me to approach the side desk to process the paperwork. I stand up and smooth the front of my wool coat. I step toward the administrative counter, pulling my certified cashier checks from my leather bag. The transaction is swift. I sign the transfer deeds, acquiring the original building free and clear of any encumbrances. The property belongs to me once again. But the mathematics of this victory are calculated with chilling precision. The lowball sum I just paid the bank is nowhere near enough to cover the staggering debt my brother accumulated. I bought the building for a mere fraction of the owed amount. The transaction satisfies the primary lien, but it leaves a gaping, multi-million-dollar hole in the ledger. The lending firm will still issue a deficiency judgment for the remaining unpaid balance. My parents are still entirely responsible for the rest of the loan. The bank will still take their sprawling estate, their retirement funds, and their social standing. I have reclaimed my territory, and I have left them chained to the corpse of their own greed. I gather my stamped receipts and slide them into my bag. I turn away from the administrative desk and walk toward the center aisle to exit the hall. Albert and Vivian are waiting for me near the heavy double doors. They rushed down from the back bench the moment the gavel fell. Their faces are streaked with tears, but their eyes are wide with a sudden, fragile relief. They saw me approach the clerk. They realized it was their daughter who raised the winning paddle. In their minds, the narrative is already shifting. They are assuming I bought the building to save the family. They are convincing themselves that this is a grand gesture of forgiveness, a sign that I am ready to merge my wealth with theirs and rescue them from the consequences of their betrayal. They stand in my path, their hands outstretched, ready to offer hollow apologies and welcome me back into their toxic fold. They have no idea that the final blow has yet to be delivered. The true nature of my purchase is about to be revealed, and the shock wave will leave them standing in the freezing Providence wind with nothing left to hold on to. What is 15 years of your life worth? Most people measure it in milestones, like mortgages or promotions. I measured mine in inventory shipments, coastal storm preparation, and the scent of roasted espresso cutting through the morning brine. But if you ask my parents, a decade and a half of my loyalty had a precise and undeniable cash value. Exactly $1. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled my own family legacy, welcome to Intimately Told Stories. If you have ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, hit subscribe and let me know your age in the comments below so we can share our experiences. The heavy oak doors of the auction hall swing shut behind me, muting the drone of the auctioneer. I stand in the echoing concrete lobby, the stamped transfer deeds resting securely in my leather tote. Before I can reach the main exit, two figures block my path. Vivian reaches out her trembling fingers, grasping the sleeve of my wool coat. Her eyes are bloodshot, the carefully applied makeup smeared across her cheekbones. She smells of stale designer perfume and raw panic. Albert stands beside her, his shoulders heaving as he struggles to catch his breath. The sight of their shattered pride is stark, yet it evokes no pity within me. Charlene Vivian weeps, her voice cracking into a high, desperate register. You saved us! I knew you would not let the bank take everything. We were so foolish to trust your brother. We see that now. We see everything clearly. Albert nods vigorously, wiping his face with a crumpled handkerchief. He attempts to summon a fraction of his old patriarchal authority, but the effort crumbles into a pathetic plea. We can fix this, he stammers. We can merge the accounts. I will draft the paperwork myself. We will cut Derek out of the trust entirely. You will have full control of the legacy, just like you always wanted. We can reopen the doors by Christmas. They are clinging to a delusion, constructing a fantasy where my strategic purchase is a declaration of forgiveness. They believe I spent my hard-earned capital to rescue them from the consequences of their own arrogance. They think blood ties bind me to their sinking ship. I look down at my mother's hand gripping my coat. I do not pull away, nor do I offer comfort. I simply meet her frantic gaze with a steady, glacial stare. Meet me at the property in 1 hour, I instruct. My tone clinical and attached, I turn and walk through the glass exit doors, leaving them standing in the sterile lobby. The freezing Providence wind whips across the parking lot, biting at my skin, but my mind is focused on the final phase of this operation. The drive back to the coast takes 45 minutes. The gray winter sky presses down on the Narragansett Bay, turning the churning water into an expanse of liquid slate. I pull my truck up to the curb outside the shuttered brick building that once housed Young Coastal Provisions. The municipal chains still secure the front entrance. A licensed locksmith is already waiting for me on the sidewalk, holding a heavy set of commercial bolt cutters. I hand the locksmith my freshly stamped deed. He verifies the legal seal clamps his tools onto the fixed steel links and snaps the chains. The metal falls to the frosted pavement with a dull metallic clatter. A silver sedan pulls up to the curb just as I push the heavy wooden door open. Albert and Vivian scramble out of the vehicle, their faces flushed with a renewed, frantic hope. They follow me into the darkened retail floor, eager to reclaim the kingdom they so foolishly gave away. The interior of the building is a tomb. The air is stagnant, carrying the sickening, lingering odor of spoiled fish and decaying cardboard. The pristine, authentic atmosphere I maintained for 15 years is entirely erased. In its place stands a graveyard of cheap white laminate fixtures, clouded digital touchscreens, and racks of generic imported trinkets gathering dust. The silence is profound, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing against the historic brick walls. Vivian surveys the ruins, her hands fluttering nervously. We can hire a cleaning crew tomorrow, she suggests, her voice echoing in the hollow space. We can rip out these terrible kiosks. We can call Captain Russo and ask him to restock the fresh catch. It will take some work, but we can restore the prestige. I do not respond. I walk past the rotting seafood counter and head directly for the back office. The room is dark and cramped, smelling of stale coffee and desperation. I flip the light switch. The overhead fluorescent bulbs hum to life, casting a harsh, pale glow over the cluttered desk my brother abandoned. I scan the wood-paneled walls until my eyes land on the object I came here to retrieve. Hanging directly above the desk, encased in a cheap black plastic frame, is a single crisp $1 bill. The very same bill I slapped onto the counter the morning they tried to purchase my lifelong loyalty with a severance contract. Derek framed it as a trophy, a monument to his unearned, arrogant victory. I reach up and take the frame off the nail. I press my thumbs against the plastic backing, popping the clasps open, and extract the green paper currency. I fold the bill precisely in half and slip it into the pocket of my coat. Albert stands in the doorway, watching me with a confused, frantic expression. What are you doing, Charlene? We need to focus on the renovations. We need to strategize the grand reopening. I turn around, leaning against the edge of the abandoned desk. I look at the two people who raised me, who betrayed me, and who are now begging for a salvation that does not exist. There is no grand reopening, I state, letting the cold reality of my words fill the cramped office. I am not restoring this market. I am not calling Captain Russo to stock these shelves. He already delivers his entire haul to my docks at the outpost. Vivian pales, her hands dropping to her sides. But you bought the building. You paid the bank. I bought the physical structure, I correct her, enunciating each syllable with surgical precision. And I purchased it for a fraction of what you owe. The transaction satisfied the primary lien, taking the property out of the lender portfolio, but the mathematics of your ruin are still very much intact. I watch the confusion morph into sheer terror as Albert begins to understand the legal mechanics of the auction. My bid did not cover the principal balance of the bridge loan I explained delivering the fatal verdict. It left a multi-million-dollar deficit in the ledger. The bank is going to issue a deficiency judgment for the remainder of the debt. They are still going to seize the Ocean Drive estate. They are still going to empty your retirement accounts. You are still bankrupt. I did not buy this building to save you. I bought it because the location serves my long-term expansion strategy. Albert stumbles backward, his shoulders hitting the doorframe. The color drains from his face, leaving his skin a sickly, translucent gray. You cannot do this, he gasps, clutching his chest. We will have nowhere to go. We will lose everything. You lost everything the moment you handed this legacy to a man who refused to respect the work. I reply, my voice devoid of pity. You made your choice. Gravity is just finishing the job. I walk past them, stepping out of the office and back into the ruined retail floor. I pause near the front entrance, looking back at the two shattered figures standing in the shadows of their own hubris. Take whatever personal items you want, I tell them, pushing the heavy wooden door open. The demolition crews arrive on Monday. I am bulldozing the entire structure. I step out into the freezing coastal wind, leaving them trapped in the dark, rotting shell of their own greed. The New England winter yields to a bright, vibrant spring. The frozen earth softens, and the harbor bursts back to life with the arrival of the early tourist season. The outpost operates at maximum capacity, generating record-breaking revenue and solidifying its place as the undisputed crown jewel of the historic waterfront. A mile down the street, the skyline has permanently changed. The crumbling brick building that once housed Jung Coastal Provisions is gone. The rubble was cleared months ago. In its place stands a sprawling, multi-level parking structure, engineered with a beautiful cedar facade that blends seamlessly with the maritime architecture of the town. Newport waterfront suffered from a severe infrastructure bottleneck for decades. Tourists had nowhere to leave their vehicles, stifling the local trade. I solved the crisis. The new facility offers hundreds of designated spots, providing seamless access to the docks, the harbor, and a direct shuttle service straight to the front doors of the outpost. The lot operates at full capacity from dawn until dusk, generating a continuous stream of passive municipal revenue, while funneling thousands of eager customers directly into my thriving market. It is a crisp Tuesday morning in early June. The sky is a brilliant, cloudless blue. I stand at the entrance of the newly paved facility, admiring the smooth asphalt and the freshly painted yellow lines. Mr. Henderson, the retired harbor pilot, pulls his vintage sedan up to the automated entry gate. He rolls down his window, a broad, appreciative grin spreading across his weathered face. You actually did it, Charlene! He chuckles, gesturing toward the sprawling structure. You gave us a place to park. The city council should build a statue in your honor. Just serving the community, Mr. Henderson, I reply, offering a genuine warm smile. He pulls into a spot, leaving the automated payment kiosk idle. I walk over to the gleaming metal machine. The digital screen glows brightly in the morning sun, prompting the user to insert payment for hourly access. I reach into the pocket of my canvas jacket. My fingers brush against a folded piece of paper currency. I pull out the crisp $1 bill, the very same note that hung in my brother's office as a monument to his unearned, arrogant victory. The same bill my parents believed was fair compensation for 15 years of my life. I smooth the creases of the green paper. I slide the bill into the illuminated slot of the automated ticket machine. The internal gears whir to life, pulling the currency into the cash box with a sharp, satisfying mechanical hum. The machine registers the payment, printing a small paper receipt that drops into the metal tray below. I retrieve the printed ticket, listening to the barrier arm lift with a smooth hydraulic hiss. I stand on the very ground where my family legacy once stood, feeling the warm coastal breeze sweep across the harbor. The air smells of salt, roasted espresso, and undeniable freedom. The debt is settled. The empire is built. The final transaction is complete. There's this unspoken, almost sacred belief woven into the fabric of American culture. The idea that the family business is the ultimate expression of the American dream. It's a romanticized notion where a name on a storefront signifies not just a commercial enterprise, but unity, resilience, and a legacy passed from one generation to the next. We are conditioned to view the traditional family structure as a sanctuary, a safe harbor meant to protect us from the unforgiving tides of the outside world. But what happens when the very architects of that sanctuary, our parents, build it on the unstable grounds of favoritism and emotional blindness? What happens when the legacy becomes a tomb? As I reflect on the story of Charlene and the Young family, I'm forced to confront uncomfortable truths about parenting values, family responsibility, and the long-term guidance of children. We like to think that parental love is inherently pure, that mothers and fathers naturally act in the best interests of their offspring. Yet Albert and Vivian Young demonstrate a terrifying reality: parental love, when unmoored from honesty, fairness, and emotional awareness, can mutate into a destructive force that ruins the very children it seeks to elevate. This story forces us to look closely at the dynamic between the golden child and the utility child. Parenting within a traditional structure demands a delicate, unwavering commitment to emotional awareness. It requires parents to see their children for who they truly are, not for who they wish them to be. Albert and Vivian failed this fundamental test. They looked at their son Derek and saw an executive visionary, despite a lifetime of evidence pointing to his incompetence and entitlement. They subsidized his ego, shielded him from consequence, and bought his credentials, seemingly believing that an expensive degree could substitute for actual character. In their desperate blind bid to elevate Derek, they committed the ultimate parental betrayal. They sacrificed their competent child to insulate their fragile one. Charlene wasn't viewed as a daughter with her own dreams, rights, and need for validation. She was reclassified as a utility. She was the sweat equity that funded their luxurious lifestyle and the unseen engine that powered their social standing. This dynamic is tragically common in families where emotional awareness is absent. The highly capable child is burdened with the silent expectation of infinite sacrifice. They are taught that their worth is conditional, tethered strictly to their usefulness, while the golden child is taught that their worth is inherent and unquestionable. When Albert and Vivian slid that $1 severance agreement across the counter, trying to buy 15 years of grueling labor for a single bill, they didn't just steal a business. They communicated a devastating philosophical stance. Your loyalty is our property, and your future is expendable. This raises profound questions about long-term child guidance. There is a pervasive belief in American culture that family must be preserved at any price. Blood is thicker than water, we say. using the adage to justify forgiving endless transgressions in the name of kinship. But what happens when the traditional family structure is weaponized? What happens when the demand for loyalty becomes a demand for indentured servitude? Albert and Vivian's failure highlights a crucial distinction. Removing obstacles from a child's path does not make them strong. It leaves them uniquely vulnerable to the harsh realities of the world. By handing Derek an empire he didn't build, they denied him the essential crucible of failure. They sent him into a brutal coastal economy, armed only with unearned confidence and a profound lack of respect for the people who actually sustain the trade. The harbor, the ocean, and the suppliers represent the impartial, unyielding nature of reality. The world outside the family home does not care about a parent's adoration. It does not respect a purchased title. It respects competence, authenticity, and relationships forged through shared struggle. When Derek encountered this reality, his collapse was not just probable, it was a mathematical certainty. His parents didn't set him up for success. By insulating him from the necessity of hard work and fairness, they engineered his public destruction. As I analyze this narrative, I find that the most profound emotional resonance lies where logic and emotion collide. Charlene's journey is a masterclass in this collision. Her refusal to save her parents from the toxic bridge loan they co-signed is a moment that challenges the conventional boundaries of familial duty. When Albert stood in the dim light of the outpost, begging his daughter to chain her thriving empire to his sinking ship, he was invoking the traditional rules of family obligation. He expected Charlene to yield, assuming that a daughter's innate desire for her father's approval would override her instinct for survival. But Charlene's emotional awareness had evolved beyond the need for their validation. She recognized that setting herself on fire to keep her family warm wouldn't save them. It would merely ensure they all turned to ash together. If this exploration of family loyalty and the quiet, heavy battles of self-preservation resonates with the reality of your own life, I encourage you to subscribe to Intimately Told Stories. Share your reflections in the comments below and join a community that understands the true cost of breaking generational cycles. Charlene's final act, letting gravity do its job, purchasing the foreclosed building at auction, only to bulldoze it into a parking garage, is a chilling, surgical conclusion. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Is it possible to win a war against your own blood without losing a piece of your humanity in the process? We are relentlessly conditioned to believe that forgiveness is the ultimate virtue, that keeping a family intact is the highest moral imperative. We are told that grace requires us to continually offer our hands to those who have repeatedly pushed us into the tide. But Charlene's story brings a counter-conventional viewpoint to light, one that challenges the very foundation of unconditional family loyalty. Unconditional love should never equate to unconditional access to your destruction. Accountability is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate expression of fairness. Sometimes the most profound act of justice a parent can receive is the unshielded consequence of their own blatant favoritism. And for the child who was bled dry, true strength is not found in a tearful reconciliation or a heroic rescue. The unorthodox truth is this: blood does not entitle anyone to your ruin. The most honest, morally sound decision you can ever make is simply stepping aside, allowing the architecture of arrogance to collapse under its own weight, and leaving you free to pave your own road directly over the rubble. Because ultimately, the legacy you build for yourself is far more valuable than the one you are forced to inherit.